Chapter 5:14. Although the old ancestor of Leiyuan's sect was in the peak stage of nature's test, he was about to die. He was old and weak, so he closed his six senses and practiced in isolation. Su Li easily planted the seal of soul control in his body. So, in just 3 or 4 days, the entire Leiyuan sect was under her control. Everything happened so fast that immortal Mi Xen couldn't accept it completely. However, he had been in the cultivation circle for many years. When he thought about it carefully, he didn't think there was any harm. Instead, there were many benefits. Since immortal Qi Yu and Gui Lazy were controlled by this person, he would no longer be targeted. In the future, Leiyuan's sect would be run by Fan Zisong. As Fan Zisong's teacher, he would not be in a bad situation. He comforted himself. Seeing the old figure in the forbidden area bowing to the beautiful woman, he couldn't help but have complex emotions in his heart. This time, Su Li did it in front of him. On the one hand, it was because she didn't have enough ability to stop it. On the other hand, it was because he didn't have a deep relationship with the old ancestor. If the old ancestor was his deceased master, he would make a different choice. Su Li didn't know the inner changes of immortal Mi Xen, and she didn't bother to know it. After solving the biggest obstacle of Leiyuan's sect, she finally had the first slave of Junior Emperor. Although this slave was useless in the battle, he had lived long enough. It was good for him to explain the practice to Yan Zai and others. As for Fan Zisong, Li Yin would guide him when he woke up. She didn't need to worry about him. Seeing that they had wasted a lot of time here, Su Li ordered Yan Zai and others to go back and took Gui Lazy with them. It seems that I forgot something. At the gate of the mountain, Su Li looked back at the towering mountain. She waved her sleeves and disappeared in the sky with the wind. Old ancestor, hey. In the forbidden area of the back mountain, First Elder widened his eyes and said in a trembling voice, "The Millennium Foundation of Leiyuan's sect." The skinny old man with dry hair said coldly, "Or you can take the seat on the platform of Leiyuan's sect." First Elder held his breath and quickly lowered his head in fear. "I dare not. I have my reasons for doing this. You just need to manage the sect well and assist the new young lord. You don't need to know the rest. Understand?" I understand. The great elder nodded repeatedly and heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. After being warned like this by the ancestor, he didn't want anything else. All he wanted was to let go of all the mistakes he had made before, and that was the best result. In a clean, quiet room in the back mountain of Ni sect. "Master, that's all I know." Gui Lazy stood respectfully in front of the stone table, his eyes full of awe. Su Li waved her hand. "Go back to Leiyuan's sect. You are still the disciple of immortal Qi Yu. Don't show any abnormality. If anything happens in Fenglei sect, report to me." "Yes, sir." After Gui Lazy left, Su Li returned to her resting place and sat down cross-legged. "Divine Phoenix Lightning Sect," she muttered to herself with a thoughtful look in her eyes. 1,200 years ago, Gui Lazy made a mistake in the holy sect of Wind and Thunder and was sent to Jiuzhou region as a spy. He had not returned to the sect until now. However, he still got a lot of information about the major events that happened in the holy sect over the years through his connections. Among them, there was Reincarnation Realm. For the first time, she knew that not all holy sects agreed with the plan of Reincarnation Realm. Fenglei sect was one of the few holy sects that was extremely disgusted with Fate Ancestor and did not send disciples to Reincarnation Realm. In this way, Su Li had a good impression of Fenglei sect. However, that was all. At present, the plan was not finished, and she didn't really have the ability to protect herself in front of the holy sections. If it was not necessary, she didn't want to get in touch with any holy sects for the time being. Thinking of this, Su Li stopped thinking and focused her attention on the thing in her hand. This was a tattered booklet. Several pages were missing in the back, but it did not affect her reading the spells recorded in the front. There was a rather complicated pattern on one page. Blood-burning spell diagram. Su Li softly read the name next to the pattern and frowned slightly. She knew quite a few strange and uncanny techniques, but this was the first time she had seen such a strange technique. Qi Yu used this to stimulate the bloodstone, and his strength soared by more than 3 times in an instant. According to him, he met a dying evil practitioner in his early years and got it. He fumbled for hundreds of years before he accidentally learned it. Su Li groped the rough page, stared at the pattern for a moment, closed her eyes, and tried to outline the complete pattern in her mind. But only half of it was outlined, and the memory was inexplicably broken. It's weird. With my current realm, I have a photographic memory. But I can't remember this pattern. Su Li was interested and was about to try again, but she suddenly heard Su Bai's pitiful voice in her ear. "Sister, I'm hungry." An hour later, Su Li returned to the stone room calmly, and her hair was still faintly charred. Although she could feel that the golden thunder seed bred by the divine thunder of earth in her body had advanced a step, the feeling of being struck by thunder was always uncomfortable. "I still have a lot of substitutes, and it's not a problem to feed Su Bai in 10 years. 10 years later, after checking her external incarnation, Su Li sighed slightly and began to doubt whether it was right or wrong to abduct Su Bai. But when she thought of the legend of the Thunder of Tranquility that Black Lotus said, she dispelled the idea of sending Su Bai out. She had a hunch that she must get the Thunder of Tranquility, or she would not be able to resist some disasters. Taking a breath, Su Li's eyes became clear again. She got rid of the distractions and focused on the diagram. She wanted to ask Black Lotus about the diagram, but since she came back from Mount Fenglei, Black Lotus had been curled up and did not come out. She didn't know what he was doing. Time passed very quickly when she concentrated on practicing. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. In this year, with the help of Gui Lazy, the spy of Holy Sects, Ni sect found out most of the spies of Holy Sects in the 25 sections. Yen Zai and others attacked very quickly. By the end of the year, 19 sects in the 25 sects had fallen into their hands. Such a fast speed naturally caused some trouble, and the remaining 6 sects noticed that something was wrong. But after Su Li went out for a trip, Jiuzhou region quickly returned to peace, and Holy Sects still knew nothing about it. On this day, it snowed in Jiuzhou region, and the mountain behind the snow was covered with white, covering the traces of being struck by thunder for punishment. Su Li stood on the top of the mountain, facing the fine snow, but it was blocked by an invisible shield and flew away. Behind him, Yen Zai stood at the side. His aura was long and mellow. He'd taken over a dozen sects and forces in succession, and his temperament had undergone a tremendous change compared to 2 years ago. He faintly revealed a steady and dignified aura that was difficult to shake. But at this moment, there was a trace of respect on his face. "Zai, your practice this year is slow," she said softly, and Yen Zai immediately smiled bitterly. Although he ran around this year, his cultivation did not fall behind. He had broken through to Huashan realm and stabilized in the middle stage of Huashan realm. This speed was enough to be proud of for any core disciple of Holy Sects, but the master even thought it was slow. "You are right." Even so, Yen Zai still nodded with a bitter smile and did not refute. Su Li was suddenly speechless and looked back with a smile. "It's none of your business. I have devoted myself to research this year and forgot to help you practice." As she said, she turned over her palm, and a dozen jade bottles of different sizes appeared in her hand. Each jade bottle was marked with a name. When Yen Zai saw a jade token marked with his name in one of the bottles, he felt inexplicably familiar. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. Although he did not join the Linli building in the reincarnation world, he also heard that the master's medical skills were unique in the world. The powder refined by the master could greatly improve the speed of practice. Could it be, every bottle of elixir I developed for you is unique? I wrote the usage and dosage in the bottle. Remember not to pass it to the wrong person, otherwise the consequences are unpredictable. Su Li waved her hand, and all the jade bottles flew up. Yen Zai caught them in a hurry and curled his lips helplessly. He did not have the sense of majesty just now. "By the way, Master, I got the result of the information you asked me to inquire about." After putting away the jade bottles, he suddenly remembered one thing. He looked serious and said in a deep voice, "Someone indeed used your name to re-establish the Linli building in Qingshui Circle." Su Li's eyes flashed. "Do you know who the founder is?" Yen Zai shook his head. The whereabouts of the fake, Linli building is very secretive. After it stole the immortal poisonous insect, Sound Acquaintance, from the Jiguang sect in Jiuli region last year, it disappeared. There are few traces of it, but there are many rumors in the outside world. What did they say? Wasn't the holy sect in Jiuli region destroyed last year? Yen Zai said and carefully looked at Su Li's side face. Now many people in the cultivation circle say that it was done by the Linli building, and it was done by you, master. Oh. Su Li raised her eyebrows and looked back at Yen Zai with a faint smile. What do you want to say? Yen Zai smiled embarrassedly. Master, please don't blame me. It's really hard to distinguish the truth from the falsehood when some information is put together. I also found out that in the gambling battle of immortal poisonous insect, the person of the Jiguang sect actually used the same pseudonym as you. The lord of the Jiguang sect is also coincidentally called Xian Jingzhou, and his wife's name is Su Yu. Hearing this, Su Li was suddenly stunned. What did you say? Yen Zai was also stunned. Master, you really don't know. Su Li couldn't hear the following words clearly. In her mind, only Su Yu, who died in front of her in the rainy night, full of worry and regret, repeatedly appeared. In this life, did Xian Jingzhou marry Su Yu? Then Xian and Su Li lifted the corners of her mouth, and a trace of joy naturally appeared in her eyes. At this moment, Yen Zai seemed to feel that even the gloomy sky was a little brighter. After a few breaths, Su Li's expression returned to calm, but her tone was much lighter. It was indeed me who killed the holy sect of Tianyin. Don't spread this matter. As for the Linli building, continue to pay attention to it. If you can find a way to join it, inform me immediately. Although Yen Zai had guessed it for a long time, when he heard Su Li admit it, he couldn't help but be shocked secretly. One person destroyed a sect. Master's cultivation progress was even more exaggerated than in the reincarnation world. Chapter 5:15. After Yen Zai left, only Su Li was left on the top of the mountain. The snow suddenly increased and fell from the sky like goose feathers. The world became quieter and quieter. Su Li's clothes were thin, and her eyes narrowed slightly. Somehow, she suddenly thought of the first day when she woke up in the second life in the reincarnation mirror. The same heavy snow and the same thin body, but at this moment, she could not feel the cold. In a year, she had thoroughly understood the blood-burn diagram. In essence, it was just to outline runes in her mind and create a strange power to stimulate the power in the bloodstone. According to Black Lotus, this was called visualization method, which was quite popular among the human clan in ancient times, but now it was lost and rarely seen. Visualization and the inhibition that I once came into contact with in Song Lei's cave. There must be a reason why the powerful skills that have been passed down in antiquity times have been broken up until now. However, whenever I mention this matter, Black Lotus is vague about it. Is it because I haven't reached that level yet? Rubbing the surface of the ring between her fingers, Su Li withdrew her wandering thoughts and focused on her own practice again. The visualization technique consumed one's soul. Even she couldn't cultivate day and night, so she used the rest time to refine the spiritual jades. The energy of the spiritual jades entered her body, which was very comfortable and could slightly offset her fatigue. In just 1 year, she had eaten up all the spiritual jades compensated by the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. The Suiyu seed is almost full and almost burst. The feeling of the body can't be wrong. It's time to go to the next level of Suiyu tactics. As Su Li thought, the Suiyu tactics in her body naturally showed the breath of breakthrough. In a moment, the next veil of Suiyu tactics was silently torn. The narrow top of the mountain was instantly shrouded by a mysterious breath. The nothingness was twisted like a multifaceted mirror. Even Su Li's figure was completely distorted. Kill. If the world doesn't tolerate you, you can kill your way out. Family, love, and siblings are all obstacles. Kill them all. The supreme way of peace can be high. The evil ghost behind her suddenly swelled, opened its big mouth full of sharp teeth, and swallowed the black air around Su Li's ear. The evil sound stopped abruptly. The body of the evil ghost fluctuated for a moment, and soon calmed down and returned to its original state. Su Li was interested in dipping her fingertips into a little residual breath, and thought, what was this? The test of breakthrough was too simple. Even if the evil ghost didn't swallow it, it couldn't shake her heart. Was her state of mind too strong? Su Li didn't think so. Her state of mind was different from that of ordinary practitioners, but even Yen Zai and others could easily bear the evil sound just now. In this way, the first level of Sueyu tactics that I have broken through is not a big deal. Even among the disciples who practiced this method in antiquity times, the second level was common. My physical cultivation had met the conditions of breakthrough, but I lacked the spiritual jades. Su Li sighed when she thought of it. This was the disadvantage of being a rogue cultivator. You obtained a mental cultivation method for free, but you didn't have the corresponding cultivation method. You could only rely on yourself to explore. If you could erase the time spent exploring, you would definitely be able to reduce the cultivation time to an extremely significant extent. Kueyu Palace. I'm afraid that there is only a word about this force in the ancient books of holy sections. It is too far away for me. Well, I can't rush to practice Sueyu tactics. I have to start from Chuangxing Path. Maybe the Star Hall will give me a surprise. Su Li calmed down and raised her right hand. It could be faintly seen that there was a layer of almost transparent gray film on her white skin, like a veil. Is this the change brought by the second level of Sueyu tactics? Su Li sensed carefully and tried to control the gray film. Suddenly, she felt that the gray film trembled slightly and emitted a very special smell. In fact, even Su Li didn't know what it was. Besides, there was no target around, so she didn't know the effect. Buzz, after a faint buzz, the special smell spread to the surrounding area of 1,000 feet. It could no longer be maintained and drifted away. However, Su Li clearly felt that there seemed to be a small world within 1,000 feet. She even had a feeling that even if she took action, it would not be noticed by the natural law. Seeing this, Su Li thought of something and took all the smell back into her body. The surrounding area returned to normal. She immediately called softly, Black Lotus, with a black face, reluctantly came out of the ring. He couldn't hide the horror in his tone. Without my guidance, you actually learned the basic level of Sueyu tactics? Su Li tilted her head and her eyes flashed. Her smile was indescribably dangerous. It seems that you have already known the practice method of Sueyu tactics, but you didn't tell me? I didn't. Black Lotus immediately shook his head and said quickly, I only know that Sueyu tactics needs to be practiced with jade energy. I don't know anything else. You deliberately concealed such important information. Su Li still smiled. Tell me the reason, otherwise, crack. A little electric light rose from her fingertip, which made Black Lotus's scalp numb. Thunder and lightning were everywhere in Mount Fengla. In addition, Su Li ran the divine thunder in her body. He had been electrocuted badly enough. It took him a year to recover. Master, please calm down. I'll tell you, okay? Black Lotus was so aggrieved that he wanted to cry. It's true that Sueyu tactics is the core method of Kueyu Palace. But no one has practiced that mental method except the Palace Lord herself. And everyone who tried to practice it was crazy. Su Li looked cold. Why didn't you say it earlier? How dare I stop such a powerful person from giving you the method? Black Lotus faintly showed fear on his face, and I didn't expect that you could learn the basic level. Your practice method is not the same as that of the disciples of Kueyu Palace in those days. You didn't use the Pojing Jade. Su Li raised her eyebrows. Didn't you just say that you didn't know the specific practice method of Kueyu Palace? Black Lotus immediately covered his face. How could he accidentally spill the beans? I didn't say it because I was afraid. I underestimated the people in the world. Underestimated. Su Li. Forget it. If I want to be the enemy of the holy sects in those days, I can't let go of any means to become stronger. So what if I am crazy? Even if I am really crazy, I will be a madman that makes the fate ancestor tremble. Su Li's eyes were extremely cold, and her tone seemed to have no temperature, which made Black Lotus break into a cold sweat. Was the master going further and further on the road of madness? The scene of a crazy woman being besieged by hundreds of holy sects naturally emerged in his mind, and his lips trembled suddenly. He felt that even for himself, it was necessary to stop Su Li from becoming a madman. Master, don't rush to extremes. Since the Lord of Kueyu Palace can practice Sueyu tactics, you may also be able to. When you learned the basic level just now, did you hear the bewitching sound in your ears? Su Li smiled and nodded, yes. Black Lotus instantly felt that he was trapped, but he didn't think so much at the moment. He frowned and said, this is a sign of being possessed by the devil. The devil I mentioned is not the person of the evil circle, but the real demons and ghosts. Master, if you are bewitched by the sound, you will lose your mind. At that time, you can't even maintain a human shape. You will be like a pig and a dog, and become a low-level demon who only knows killing. Su Li twisted her fingertips, as if she was recalling the feeling just now. The sound is not a threat to me at all. It can't affect me at all. Master, you are just at the basic level now. Don't underestimate the sound. Black Lotus sighed and thought of those disciples he saw in Kueyu Palace. Their reactions were exactly the same as Su Li's. Now the sound is not powerful. When it finds that it can't do anything to you, it will be dormant and wait for the opportunity to take action. It can even absorb the pneuma you emit to strengthen itself. When you break through Sueyu tactics next time, the second sound will also be born. At that time, the two sounds will be heard, and the bewitching effect will be greatly improved. Next time, it will be 3. Wait! Su Li suddenly interrupted Black Lotus's words and said strangely, you said the sound will be dormant? Black Lotus nodded naturally. Anyone who had stayed in Kueyu Palace knew that although he went to steal, but he remembered all this common sense when he was carrying things. Su Li's smile widened and she chuckled, I know where the sound is. Black Lotus was stunned for a moment, and then he saw the little master pointed to her shadow and said helplessly, it seems to have eaten something terrible. Black Lotus was even more confused. Evil Ghost was born to restrain the sound of magic? There was no precedent in the past. Su Li was the first, and Black Lotus fell into a long tangle. Su Li didn't think so much. There was still a long time before the next breakthrough of Sueyu tactics. For her, Sueyu tactics was just one of the means to enhance her strength. She knew too many things. Sometimes, it's not a good thing to know too many things. Back to the addendum, Su Li put Black Lotus aside and began to sort out and summarize what she had learned. She extracted the essence and got rid of the dregs, which was extremely necessary before she went on the Chuangxing path again. First of all, physical practice. Thanks to countless natural disasters, her physical body was repeatedly refined. Zueixing swordsmanship and punching method could no longer improve the physical strength. She still remembered that when she went on the Chuangxing path last time, she didn't dare to use the 10th move at all. Although that move was powerful, it consumed 80% of her genuine energy. But now, with the 10th move, she could wave hundreds of times in the blink of an eye with her physical body alone. Su Li tried to practice the 11th move, but was reminded by Black Lotus that she lacked the characteristics of the school and it was difficult to comprehend. This was not caused by the understanding but the characteristics of the school. She didn't plan to leave the Jiuzhou region to find it in a short time, so she had to leave it temporarily. The punching method had been completely reduced to a means of attack, and was no longer a way to improve. As for the harvest in the reincarnation mirror, the Ghost Valley meditation direction had been completely comprehended by her, and even innovated. After combining with her memory in Qingshui Circle, it completely evolved into a new and unique school of refining medicine. After she realized the destruction sword intent of AO sword skills, all the moves in it were meaningless. Only the quenching method of sword intent was left, and the others were abandoned. After her rebirth, she had the body of Evil Ghost, and then encountered the divine thunder. The Evil Ghost emerged behind Su Li. She looked back at her past face and smiled. Su Li, you finally live like a human. Chapter 5:16. 3 days later, Su Li came out of practice, and Hua Yan immediately came to find her. The sects that are easier to control have all been taken care of. The next sects are all connected with each other. The old ancestors have a close relationship. If we pull a hair, it will affect the whole sect. It's not easy to handle. Su Li thought for a moment and reached out her hand. Do you have the relationship chart of the sects? Hua Yan smiled proudly. Of course I do. Otherwise, the network I've built would be wasted. Then she took out a jade slip from the universe ring and handed it to Su Li. Su Li took it and scanned it with her divine awareness. She immediately knew all the relationships between the 25 sections. Seeing Su Li was thinking, Hua Yan didn't disturb her and waited quietly. After a while, Su Li suddenly frowned with interest. What's the matter with the immortal cultivation sect? The head of the sect is in the early stage of Yuaning realm. There are many sects like this in Jiuzhou region. Why can it become one of the 25 sects? That's right. Hua Yan chuckled and seemed to have expected Su Li's curiosity. She immediately explained, the immortal cultivation sect ranks last among the 25 sects, but it has been steadily occupying the position of the 25 sects for thousands of years. Speaking of it, it has a lot to do with the strategy of the head of the sect. The inheritance of the immortal cultivation sect has long been broken, but it has exported a lot of good seedlings to the other 25 sects in the early years. Now those seedlings have grown into towering trees, and in turn, they protect the immortal cultivation sect. In this way, those sects who want to rise would rather choose a more powerful sect to occupy than a small sect with endless troubles. Su Li didn't comment on the answer and said meaningfully, people's hearts are the most changeable, not to mention in the cultivation circle. Don't you think it's strange that the immortal cultivation sect can enjoy the treatment of the 25 sects by relying on its favor? Hua Yan was slightly stunned. Hearing Su Li's words, she also felt strange and said in an uncertain tone, maybe it's luck? Su Li smiled and waved her hand. The relationship chart of the immortal cultivation sect appeared in the nothingness. She pointed to several places. The inner elder of Tianluo Valley, the chief law enforcement elder of Shenbing sect, the protector of Flying Silver cult. Every position occupied by immortal cultivation sect is not conspicuous, but they have real power. If these people are really loyal to immortal cultivation sect, Hua Yan, do you still think that immortal cultivation sect is weak? Hua Yan's body trembled slightly, and her pupils shrank. You mean? Halfway through her words, she seemed to have suddenly thought of something and revealed a look of realization. No wonder. Li, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten it. When Yan Zai went to conquer the immortal cultivation sect, he said that the journey was very smooth. The Lord did not resist at all and even wanted to send some excellent disciples to the sect. Yan Zai felt strange and refused. The Lord did not insist, so the matter was over. I think Hua Yan shivered inexplicably. Her impression of the immortal cultivation sect suddenly changed from weak to mysterious and treacherous. Let Yan Zai contact the Lord of the immortal cultivation sect and arrange a core disciple identity for me. Su Li suddenly said. Hua Yan was shocked and immediately nodded. I will be ready and wait for your news. If the immortal cultivation sect was really so powerful, if she could completely control this sect, she could take in all the 25 sects except Yushu sect and Zihan sect at once. This was the fastest shortcut. She was not worried about Su Li's safety. Not many people knew the truth of the destruction of the Tianyin tribe, and she happened to be one of them. Su Li could even bring down the holy sects, not to mention a small sect with a little mysterious atmosphere. The immortal cultivation sect was located in a very remote mountain range. Su Li, wearing a bright and beautiful silk dress of female disciples of the Ni sect, stopped under the dilapidated mountain gate. Glancing at the dark sky, she frowned slightly. This place made her feel a little uncomfortable, but she couldn't tell what it was that made her uncomfortable. On the second day after Yan Zai conveyed the order, the immortal cultivation sect immediately agreed without showing the slightest resistance. Su Li estimated that she still needed some time to consolidate before going to Chuangxing Path. She had nothing else to do, so she directly packed up and pretended to be an ordinary disciple of the Ni sect. It took her a few days to rush here. You must be the new junior sister apprentice. Su Li didn't stand for a long time, and then a gentle voice came. She raised her head and saw a white flowing light falling in front of her in the blink of an eye. The light dissipated, and a young man in a white robe appeared in front of her. The young man's face was a little abnormal pale, and there was a hint of childishness in him. He had waist-length hair and looked less than 100 years old. His body was extremely thin, as if he could not stand the wind. His whole body showed a sense of femininity, but his cultivation was surprisingly high, reaching the late stage of Jindan realm. There was also a kind of obscure energy that even Su Li felt was not simple lurking in his body. The immortal cultivation sect is really not simple. It's right to come here. Su Li thought quickly in her mind, but she seemed to be scared on the surface. She blushed and hurriedly saluted. Su Yu greets you, senior fellow apprentice. Seeing that Su Li was so embarrassed, the young man was also slightly stunned. He originally thought that the Ni sect would send someone not simple to probe them, so the master asked him to go down the mountain to greet them in person, so as not to reveal any flaws. Today, the one he met when he went down the mountain was not a simple-minded female disciple. However, it would take time to see whether this woman was really simple-minded or not. Although there were many thoughts in his mind, he did not show any sluggishness on the surface. He automatically played the role of the elder brother and nodded. It's getting late. Follow me to the mountain to meet the master first. Su Li's eyes showed doubts. Senior fellow apprentice, the master is... The young man suddenly smiled gently, the lord of our immortal cultivation sect. The equally young girl's almond-shaped eyes were round and full of nervousness. She grabbed the corner of her clothes and stammered, Senior fellow apprentice? I haven't washed my clothes for several days. It's not good to meet the lord, is it? The young man. A moment later, in the main hall of the lord. The young man stood aside respectfully, leaving Su Li, who was coy all over, standing in the middle alone. She lowered her head uneasily. On the throne, He Jiao, the old lord of the immortal cultivation sect in a brown robe, looked at Su Li with kindness in his eyes. Child, raise your head and let me have a look. Su Li raised her head obediently. It was an ordinary face, which was absolutely ugly in the cultivation circle. He Jiao stared for a moment, but did not see any trace of the spell that changed her appearance. In Huajian's sect, the predecessor of Ni sect, there was indeed a female disciple named Su Yu. She was extremely young and was originally the disciple of immortal Hongyu. Later, after immortal Hongyu died, she became an ordinary Naiman branch disciple of Ni sect. It was no problem to trace her origin. So, what did Ni sect mean by sending this girl to the sect? Testing? He Jiao thought for a long time. Seeing the girl in the hall lowering her head in fear, he couldn't help but laugh. She was just an ordinary female disciple. Even if she was used some means, he had nothing to be afraid of. The rise of Ni sect is full of strangeness. Recently, they have been playing small tricks and contacting with the other 25 sects a lot. They want Zhouzhou region, which is not in conflict with my purpose. All kinds of thoughts passed through the old man's mind, and he simply asked Su Li a few questions, which were all consistent with the intelligence he secretly investigated. He smiled and waved to the weak lad. Since you are sent to my immortal cultivation sect, you will be my 12th pro-disciple in the future. Although there are few disciples in my sect and few people are willing to stay, those who stay are pure and don't scheme against each other like the big sections. What do you think? The girl was completely stunned. It seemed that she didn't expect that there would be such a big pie in the world. But she soon calmed down, with a little hesitation on her face, as if she thought of some bad memories. But she didn't hesitate for a long time, and knelt down respectfully. Her crisp and tender voice resounded through the hall. Disciple Su Yu, pay respect to master. He Jiao immediately stroked his beard and smiled. The little girl was really simple, and all her thoughts were revealed on her face. He got up, walked down from the throne, and helped Su Li up. Looking at the innocent face with some doubts, he laughed and said sincerely, "It doesn't matter if an I sect doesn't want you. This is your home in the future." The girl's eyes turned red. It seemed that she thought of many bad things, and her voice was a little choked. "Thank you, master." After that, there was a young girl who was always chattering and asking questions beside the effeminate-looking youth. Most of the time, it was the effeminate-looking youth who answered helplessly, but he did not show any impatience. He seemed to be a very patient person by nature, and he was very popular in the sect. During this period, Su Li also got the boy's name, a strange name, Wen Hun. A few days later, the news that the Lord had accepted a new personal disciple also spread. Although the Immortal Cultivation sect was a small sect, there were hundreds of disciples in Naiman Branch and Naiman Branch. This news didn't cause any waves, which made Su Li feel a little strange. She should be a girl with no schemes at the moment, so she asked directly, "Senior fellow apprentice Wen, I have become the master's personal disciple. Don't those senior fellow apprentices and senior sisters who entered the sect earlier than me have any reaction?" In the book pavilion, Su Li followed the emaciated boy. After several times of hesitation, she finally asked. When Hun put down the scroll in his hand unhurriedly and said dumbly, "I know you can't bear it for a long time, and you will ask. But this is not a secret. In our Immortal Cultivation sect, whether you are in Naiman Branch, or personal disciple, you can enjoy the same treatment of cultivation resources. There is no restriction on identity to enter and exit the book pavilion. Why do they envy you?" All the same? Su Li blinked her eyes. She was really surprised this time. Our sect is so poor. How can we support so many people? When Hun's pale face blushed. He seemed to be angry and helpless. Our sect is so poor. When you receive the first month's salary, you will know why. The first month's salary? Su Li repeated. She wanted to continue to ask, but saw when Hun's figure flashed and disappeared in the distance instantly. He slipped away. Chapter 517. Seeing that when Hun really ran away, Su Li didn't chase him. She picked up the book that when Hun read just now and opened it. It turned out to be a strange essays, which had nothing to do with cultivation. Although when Hun and Hijio are good to me, and the attitude of the disciples of the sect is also kind, I always feel that the sect lacks something. Su Li opened a page of essays and saw an illustration scribbled on it. It was a barren deep mountain with a thatched hut standing alone. Is it vitality? Su Li read the essays thoughtfully. The essays were composed of many stories, and each story was quite scary. The first story was about the thatched hut. The scholar went to the capital city for the examination and passed through the barren mountain. After entering the mountain, it rained cats and dogs. He had no place to rest. Suddenly, he saw a light in the distant deep mountain. He was overjoyed and ran to the hut to knock on the door regardless of the mud under his feet. Squeak! The door was opened a little, and a beautiful face of a woman appeared. Except for the face, everything else was immersed in the darkness. "Husband, come in quickly to take shelter from the rain." Seeing that she was alone, the scholar immediately waved his hand and said, "It's really inappropriate for you and me to live alone in this deep mountain. Husband, come in quickly to take shelter from the rain." The woman's face was very stiff, and only her lips were moving, as if she could only say this sentence. The scholar felt a little strange, but he saw that the book box behind him had leaked the rain. He didn't care so much and pushed the door and walked in. Su Li turned the next page, but it was blank. She was slightly stunned, and continued to turn the page. It was the next story. She turned it again, but it was also blank at the end. There was no ending. A story without an ending? Su Li pursed her lips slightly, and suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Junior's sister apprentice, it's late. You should go back to have a rest." Her pupils shrank, and she jumped away like a frightened rabbit. The book in her hand was also thrown out, but was caught by the person who spoke. When Hun turned around with a smile, the candlelight flickered and could only illuminate his face. "Junior's sister apprentice, it's late. You should go back to have a rest." "Senior fellow apprentice." Su Li called and felt very strange. With her perception, she didn't find that when Hun had returned. "Junior sister, it's getting late. You should go back and rest." When the voice sounded for the third time, Su Li was shocked. Looking at Wen Hun's stiff and pale face like a dead man, she immediately thought of the strange story in the barren mountain she just read. Ghosts really exist in this world? But if there was, then what was she? Her mind was filled with doubts. Suddenly, she sensed an instinctive thought from the evil ghost. Hungry, hungry? Su Li stared at Wen Hun with a stiff smile. It turned out that this thing was for eating? She abruptly turned her gaze and looked at the huge library. Different from the day, the library seemed to have lost its color at night. It was so quiet that even the croaking of frogs and insects outside the door could not be heard. How much food is there? As she turned her gaze away, she didn't see her senior's face suddenly split open from the middle, revealing rows of densely packed teeth. Wen Hun also didn't see that the shadow behind Su Li suddenly moved to his feet and opened its bloody mouth quietly. Junior sister apprentice. An anxious voice traveled into the library through the gloomy sky. There was a strange vibration in the voice, and under this vibration, the library regained its lively colors. The oppressive atmosphere immediately faded, and various sounds poured into the ears once more. She looked up at the outside of the attic. It turned out to be evening. When Hun waved his hand nervously in front of Su Li, seeing her eyes full of doubts, he breathed a sigh of relief. He came just in time. If the junior sister apprentice was harmed by the ghost here because of his negligence, his Taoist heart would inevitably have flaws and turn into an evil thought. Hey, senior fellow apprentice? Didn't you say it was late? Why is it only evening? Su Li pointed to the Jinwu hanging in the sky outside the window and began to test straightforwardly. When Hun looked serious, he glanced at the library, which became gloomy because of Su Li's words, and took Su Li away without saying anything. Until they returned to the courtyard where the personal disciples lived, he let go of Su Li's hand and faintly breathed a sigh of relief. He warned seriously, "Little junior sister apprentice, if I don't accompany you, don't go to the library alone." Su Li touched her palm. The touch just now was very cold, not like the hand of a living person. When Hun's face suddenly became hot. He hadn't held a woman's hand before. In a hurry just now, fortunately, Su Li didn't care. She just blinked and said, "Why?" Seeing the little junior sister apprentice was determined to get to the bottom of it, when Hun remembered the master's entrustment in his heart. He wanted to say something several times but stopped on second thought. Finally, he couldn't help saying, "Our immortal cultivation sect is not as simple as it seems. Don't ask so much. Practice hard, and you will know it later. There are several dangerous places in the sect. Even I don't dare to go there at night. I will mark them for you. You should remember them." As he said, he took out a blank piece of rice paper and grabbed a writing brush. Su Li stood quietly aside and stared at the bird's-eye view of the sect that slowly appeared under Wen Hun's pen. As expected, this scene fell into He Jio's eyes. Wen Hun trusts people too easily. In the dark hall, He Jio's face full of age spots showed a trace of helplessness. However, it may be a chance for him to transform. He accepted Su Yu as a personal disciple. Firstly, he wanted to give an explanation to Ni sect and maintain the superficial image. Secondly, he wanted to test whether Su Yu was real. If this woman was really a spy of Ni sect in disguise, he could pretend for a while, but he couldn't maintain the illusion all the time. After observing for a few days, he didn't think there was any big problem. At least, this girl was indeed the little girl named Su Yu. Her bone age was also very young. She was simple and straightforward. As for whether she had been played any tricks by Ni sect, he couldn't see it in a short time. In the following days, Su Li obediently followed Wen Hun's words every day and practiced seriously. She also learned the authentic mental method of immortal cultivation sect, immortal cultivation tactics under the guidance of Wen Hun. She didn't do anything out of line. After all, the sect was full of weirdness. It was hard to guarantee that He Jio would have a way of prying that she couldn't detect. There were still 9 years before the 10-year period. She still had enough time, so she didn't need to rush at this time. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, it was finally the time to receive the monthly salary. Su Li followed Wen Hun and came to the only large square of immortal cultivation sect. At this moment, there were hundreds of disciples standing sparsely in the square. It looked very deserted in the large square, which seemed to reflect the decline of immortal cultivation sect. A woman in black whom Su had never seen stood in front of the long stone table with a cold look and stood silently. On the long stone table, there were hundreds of wooden boxes, each of which was half a meter long and wide. Seeing Wen Hun coming over, she showed a kind smile on her face. But in Suli's eyes, it was a little ferocious. Well, everyone is here. You, give out the monthly salary. Hee-jio stooped and stepped forward. The woman in black showed respect on her face and nodded slightly. She waved her hand and scattered hundreds of wooden boxes on the table. Every wooden box fell into the hands of every disciple accurately, including Su. She took the wooden box floating in front of her, and her hands suddenly sank. The things in it weighed at least 100 kilograms. For the sake of prudence, she didn't use her divine awareness to check. So many. The amount of this month is so enough. I can finally eat my fill. I'm so happy, the disciples in the square said joyfully, which made Su feel more and more strange. But she didn't ask more because of the occasion. This month's salary is brought by your senior sister apprentice Yu. Thank her quickly. After Hee-jio spoke, everyone immediately came to their senses and saluted to the woman in black. Thank you, senior sister apprentice Yu. The woman in black still looked cold. She just nodded slightly and glanced at Hee-jio. After getting his consent, she turned around and disappeared into the mountain. Senior sister apprentice Yu is? Su couldn't help but transmit the sound to Wen Hun. Although the young man felt it was wrong to whisper under the nose of the master, he still replied, she is an elder of our sect. She usually practices in the deep mountain. As for the title of senior sister apprentice, it is requested by senior sister apprentice Yu. She is still young and doesn't want to be called old. Su was about to ask something else, but Hee-jio's voice suddenly interrupted her. It's not easy for our immortal cultivation sect to persist from ancient times to today. Hee-jio walked to the stone table and looked at the disciples below. His kind face was a little more dignified. Now the inheritance of the sect is broken, and there are only the first 3 hurdles of the immortal cultivation tactics. The highest level is Yuanying realm. You have to explore by yourself. It's fate for you to join our sect. The sect can't provide you with a place for cultivation, so it's fate but not fate. If anyone wants to leave the sect today, I will never blame you. Now, if you want to go down the mountain to find another chance, come out. As Hee-jio said, a pair of turbid eyes suddenly fell on several people in the field. Those people immediately sighed and stood up unwillingly. They then bowed to Hee-jio and took their leave. There were even some who were reluctant to leave. They wiped their tears as they walked down the mountain. Su was confused. She could see that these people didn't want to leave the immortal cultivation sect at all. If Hee-jio didn't call them out, they would definitely not stand out. What was worth staying in this immortal cultivation sect? Could it be, as Hee-jio said, that it was true love? With all kinds of doubts in her heart, Su returned to her residence. She opened the wooden box and saw the fresh meat with blood in it. Then she was lost in thought. A piece of meat? No wonder some people say that they can eat their fill. Su suddenly understood and felt it was absurd. She had never seen such a weird sect. What was worth staying in a sect that couldn't even eat their fill? Little junior sister apprentice, are you there? Wen Hun's voice came from outside the yard. Su happened to be confused, so she dragged him into the house without saying anything. I know you are confused now. I was the same when I first came here. Wen Hun looked at Su with a smile. Little junior sister apprentice, how long have you not eaten? Chapter 5:18. Eat. Su was stunned and asked with confusion. After practitioners reach Juji realm, we don't need to live with a full stomach. If it's delicious food, we can taste it. Why do we need to maintain 3 meals? Wen Hun chuckled. You're right. Although this piece of meat is not as delicious as you think, its effect is very special. To a large extent, the disciples who stay in the sect don't want to leave because of this piece of meat. I see. What's the effect of this piece of meat? Su Li asked immediately, but when Hun shook his head, "This is a big secret of the sect. It won't work if I say it. After you eat this piece of meat and know its effect, don't tell others. Otherwise, something bad will happen." Su Li wanted to ask what the bad thing was, but she was stopped by Wen Hun's eyes. After a while, Wen Hun left the yard. He also had to maintain his own practice, and it was impossible to keep an eye on Su Li all the time. Su Li stared at the basin-sized meat for a while, and then got up, covered the wooden box, and took it to the kitchen. Her yard was on the hillside of the main peak, next to Wen Hun's yard. Although the yard was small, it was well equipped, and even an underground ice cellar was equipped. Su Li didn't know the use of the ice cellar at first, but now she understood that it was specially used to store meat. Su Li cut a long strip of fat and lean meat from the meat, and returned to the kitchen to boil water. Then she found all the seasonings sealed in the window meticulously. Who knew how many years had passed since the last time he cooked properly? With a subtle emotion lingering in her heart, she was more agile. This scene was naturally seen in the water mirror in front of Hijio. Su Yu was born in the secular world and had a miserable life experience. She was familiar with secular farm chores since she was a child. Such familiar actions couldn't be faked, and her age and identity matched. The ghosts in the book pavilion didn't kill her, which meant that this woman was not poisoned. After all, those ghosts liked strange secret skills. If they really poisoned her, even when Hun couldn't stop those ghosts. Hijio confirmed it again and again, and his expression eased. At this moment he finally gave up the idea of continuing to probe. We can't wait for the centennial salary ceremony. With Wen Hun's physique, he should guard the sect for only 1 month. There should be no big mistake. Senior brother, I've been in the sect for a month. Why haven't I seen any other senior brothers or sisters? Master also said that I'm his 12th disciple. At the gate of the hall of the sect, Su Li and Wen Hun sat on the cold steps and looked at the deep mountain covered by thick fog. I'm the 11th. Wen Hun sighed and replied. He wanted to go back and cultivate. Why was it that when Master went out, he didn't give the task of guarding to senior sister Yu and the others, but gave it to him instead? Guarding the sect was really boring. After guarding the hall alone for a few days, he finally couldn't bear it and forced Su Li to guard with him. The feeling of loneliness was diluted a little. As for what his master had told him before he left, he had already forgotten about it during those few days of suffering. If an I sect really wanted to send a spy, how could they send such a simple and young junior sister apprentice? Based on Su Yu's character, she might have been cheated and still helped others to earn money. How could she be a spy? What about the other 10 senior brothers and sisters? Su Li blinked, and her clear and pure black eyes were full of curiosity. Every time when Hun met such a clean gaze, he didn't want to show his hypocrisy. He could only sigh again and shook his head. I don't know, little junior sister apprentice. I have practiced for less than 100 years. Since I became a disciple of Master, I haven't seen any other senior brother apprentice except you. She reached Yuanying realm in less than 100 years. Su Li was slightly shocked, but she showed surprise and envy on the surface. Senior fellow apprentice is amazing. After saying this, she was disappointed again. Compared with senior fellow apprentice's talent, I'm too ordinary. If a senior fellow apprentice hadn't given me the great opportunity of the sect, I couldn't have reached Jindan realm at all. When Hun saw that his inadvertent words hit the little junior sister apprentice, and felt ashamed. He said repeatedly, Junior sister apprentice, don't worry about it. I can practice so fast because of the means given by Master. Before I joined the sect, I was just a little beggar who was seriously ill and dying. As he said, he touched his cold skin. Master said that my life had come to an end. This method can change my fate, and I did survive. Su Li wanted to ask what the method was. But when she saw Wen Hun was in a trance, she thought for a while and didn't do anything. If she kept asking questions, Wen Hun would notice the problem even if he was stupid. In the twinkling of an eye, Wen Hun didn't need to guard the hall at night. He returned to the residence with Su Li. He cheekily ate a meal in Su Li's courtyard, and then went back. The cold moonlight shone like a layer of silver light on the stone road. Wen Hun looked back at the small yard standing in the forest, and sighed habitually. If Master imparted the holy method to the little junior sister apprentice and went to the book pavilion to practice in isolation for several years, what should I do with my mouth? 2 days ago, he smelled the fragrance from Su Li's courtyard and couldn't help but go to have a look. After seeing that the meat became delicious food in the hands of the little junior sister apprentice, he tasted it. Immediately, he fell in love with Su Li completely and gave his share of meat to Su Li just to have a meal every day. After thinking for a while, Wen Hun couldn't think of a good way, so he sighed again and turned away. After Su Li saw Wen Hun off, she closed the gate of the courtyard and returned to the addendum for practice in the house. After hanging up the sign of "Do Not Disturb Practice," everything around was quiet. Only the candlelight in the addendum flickered from time to time, and Su Li's shadow was printed on the wall, like a demon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. These meats can improve my soul slightly. Su Li pretended to practice, but thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind. She was a little dignified. My soul has reached the perfect nature soul. If I can accumulate a little more, I may be able to break through to the next realm forcibly and reach the half-immortal soul, which is comparable to the Deshang practitioner. Even I can benefit from it, let alone those ordinary disciples. No wonder they are unwilling to leave. After the improvement of my soul, my mind is agile. As for me, I can easily release tens of millions of thoughts in an instant when I reach the perfect nature soul. No matter what I learn, I can learn quickly. Those ordinary disciples may not be able to absorb the power in the meat as perfectly as I can, but, as long as their souls are improved a little, they can comprehend the mental method several times faster. After figuring it out, Su Li opened her eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. It's really fascinating. But cultivation pays attention to the balance of yin and yang, and the soul is the yin soul. If the yin soul is too strong, it will lead to the lack of yang energy and damage to the physical body. If it is not balanced to the extreme and explodes, it can even suck up all the nutrients in the physical body in an instant, and the physical body will die instantly. No wonder. Su Li's eyes brightened slightly. In an instant, she felt that the clouds and mist were dispelled, and she was suddenly enlightened. No wonder the immortal cultivation sect was short of vitality. Everyone's yin soul was too strong, which led to the lack of vitality. However, ordinary disciples couldn't feel this. They were only addicted to the pleasure of improving their souls and couldn't extricate themselves. So, Hijio drove them away from the sect. In this way, the puzzle is solved. Only the dangerous places mentioned by Wen Hun are left. While muttering to herself, Su Li glanced at the candlestick, and the candlelight went out instantly. Although she learned from Wen Hun that Hijio had left the sect, she was not sure whether Hijio was testing her or not. So, she simply observed for a few more days. Senior fellow apprentice, I'm so bored. What did the master do? Why does he ask you to guard the sect? Su Li sat beside the steps, put her hands on her knees, and sighed. Helplessness flashed on Wen Hun's pale face, and he also sighed heavily. I don't know. The master said that he would come back in 1 month. Just 1 month. Only 7 days have passed. Wen Hun's resentment was more obvious. If he was practicing, he wouldn't feel bored. But he could only stand in front of the hall every day, which was really boring. Why does the hall of the sect need someone to guard it? Su Li looked back at the closed door. When the master was there, we also went in, but there was nothing in it. Maybe there is something we can't see. It seemed that Su Li reminded him of something. Wen Hun looked thoughtful. After a while, his eyes flickered, and he glanced at Su Li, who was absent-minded beside him. His lips moved, but he finally held back and didn't say much. If he said too much and scared the junior sister apprentice away, no one would accompany him. Su Li saw that he was in a dilemma. She laughed in her heart and didn't insist. The daily intake of the soul power of that piece of meat was limited. Including the piece that Wen Hun gave her, it was just enough for her to eat for a month. Hijio left for a month, and she still had enough time. It was better to wait until her soul power accumulated to the limit, and then find out the truth. Su Li originally thought so. But on the 10th day, when she and Wen Hun came to the hall of the sect, she suddenly felt something wrong. It was so quiet. There was no sound around, and even the sound of the wind disappeared. Senior fellow apprentice, the sky seems to be darkening. Su Li looked up, and there was panic and fear in her eyes. She couldn't help but grasp Wen Hun's clothes tightly. Don't be afraid. It seemed that it was not the first time for Wen Hun to see this kind of scene. His expression was very calm, but his body was tight. He kept glancing around as if looking for something. Suddenly, he fixed his eyes and looked at a void. Su Li looked along the void, but saw nothing. With a thought, she transferred part of her power to the evil ghost. The eyes of the evil ghost in the shadow opened a little bit, and a huge and slender black snake immediately came into view. It was about 1,000 feet long, and it kept hovering in the sky. Black mist kept spurting out from the gaps of its scales, turning into strange dark clouds. The huge snake head emerged from the hovering snake body. It flicked its blood-red tongue, and 2 red lines as thin as earthworms slowly shot to the 2 people on the ground. This is the bloody red in the deep mountain. Why does it come out? Wen Hun was shocked, and his pupils contracted sharply. He grabbed Su Li and fled to the hall without saying a word. Chapter 5:19. Senior fellow apprentice, don't talk. Wen Hun clenched the hands behind him tightly, with sweat on his forehead. Gray light surged in his eyes. He saw the gate of the hall covered by the black fog at a glance, and then rushed out. The distance that could be crossed into the hall in a few steps was suddenly stretched at this moment, and seemed extremely far. Junior sister apprentice, don't make a sound. We will be safe after entering the hall. Wen Hun transmitted the sound subconsciously, but it was transmitted in the air. He was stunned, and the warm and soft feeling in his right hand immediately became cold and slippery. At this moment, Wen Hun's face changed dramatically. He suddenly threw away the thing in his hand, and saw a slender snake was thrown far away. Then it hissed unwillingly and bit Wen Hun. The gray knife light ran from the head of the snake to the tail, and instantly split the red snake into 2 halves, which fell to the ground with a clatter. Little junior sister apprentice was gone. Gray light flashed in Wen Hun's eyes, and he shook off the blood on the transparent blade. When he looked up and saw the huge red snake circling above his head, the fear in his heart was drowned by anger. He stopped running away. Little junior sister apprentice, I won't let anything happen to you. In the thick black fog, Su Li's bun loosened, and her long hair draped behind her like a waterfall. She stood alone in the center, letting the wind blow. She looked up for a moment, and then withdrew her gaze. She used the sword to pick up the long red snake on the ground that messed up her hair. Black Lotus, what is this? Black Lotus appeared. He didn't look at the dead snake on the ground, but at the sky. He licked his lips, and his eyes were full of rare excitement. These things are called ghosts. They are your natural enemies and also good things. Su Li raised her eyebrows and then chuckled. It seems that this thing is also useful to you. Black Lotus didn't hide his greed. I didn't expect that there are ghosts in the present world. It seems that there are unimaginable sins hidden in Qingshui Circle. Ghosts? Su Li repeated, and continued to ask with interest. Such an attitude of disregard seemed to annoy the existence in the sky. Its body trembled, and countless red spots fell. They turned into dense long snakes in the air and shot over. But they were cut into pieces by an invisible force, and turned into blood all over the ground. You can understand it as a kind of poison. Seeing Su Li's attentive look, Black Lotus suddenly found the feeling of being a teacher in those days. He put his hands on his hips and raised his head. This poison is not refined from ordinary poisons, but gathered from all the negative thoughts, such as resentment, hatred, anger, and so on. Mortals will die if they touch it, and ordinary practitioners will die if they encounter it. Speaking of this, Black Lotus turned his eyes. His eyes seemed to penetrate the black mist, and saw Wen Hun, who was fighting hard in the mist. The boy you like is not ordinary. It is worthwhile that you put medicine in his 3 meals every day to improve his physical body. Su Li pursed her lips, and a trace of pride appeared in her eyes. Has my eyesight ever been bad? Black Lotus rolled his eyes and said angrily, Hurry up and eat this ghost. If we delay any longer, that kid will be corroded by the ghost. Su Li's eyes slightly condensed, and the pure ghost energy flowed. The shadow behind her instantly sprang out and grew to a size of 30 meters against the wind. It opened its mouth, which was half the size of a person's body, and bit off half of the blood-red body of the giant snake. Hiss! The black mist rolled violently, and when Hun, who was exhausted, suddenly faced a formidable enemy. But he did not hear the deep fear in the crazy roar. Delicious! The evil ghost's instinctive thought came intermittently, and then its body continued to expand. It wanted to eat the upper body of the giant snake. But the giant snake rushed into the deep mountain and disappeared without saying a word. The evil ghost was not willing to let it go, and directly flew to the deep mountain to chase it. But when it flew to the boundary of the deep mountain, it hit an extremely hard and transparent wall. Boom! Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and the earth shook. What's the matter? It's an earthquake. Come out of the house. The disciples in the residence at the foot of the mountain were suddenly shocked, and were in a mess. When Hun looked at the dark clouds that suddenly dispersed in the sky, and was at a loss. Then he saw Su Li, who was also at a loss, standing not far from him. Little junior sister apprentice. He was burning with anxiety. He rushed to Su Li quickly, grasped Su Li's arms tightly, and stared at her face nervously. Junior sister apprentice. Junior sister apprentice. The little girl came to her senses, turned her eyes in confusion, and asked crisply, Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong with you? Hearing this normal sentence, when Hun was relieved, and a bright smile appeared on his pale face. Then he fell down in front of Su Li. This boy is exhausted. It's hard for him to worry about you, old witch. Black Lotus rushed out. Su Li held Wen Hun and slowly put him on the ground. Then she said indifferently, I'm 18 years old this year. Black Lotus, unconsciously, it has been more than 4 years since I was reborn. Time flies so fast. Su Li muttered to herself. She spread out her palms and saw the scorched marks on her palms. A look of thinking flashed in her eyes. Is it the fire of extreme yang? The evil ghost hit the barrier and was slightly injured. Her body would also be affected a little, but it was just a skin injury. After all, even if the evil ghost exploded, she could recover after a few months of rest. Suddenly, Su Li's ears moved slightly. Then she loosened her body and fell beside Wen Hun. After a few breaths, the woman in black flew over with a still cold face. As soon as she landed, she looked serious. She slightly opened her 5 fingers, and the white nails flashed with cold light, stabbing at Su Li's throat lying on the ground. Su Li didn't move, but the woman in black moved faster. The killing intent in her eyes almost condensed into a substance. Swish! The chilly wind blew over. The white and sharp nails stopped on the snow-white skin of Su Li's neck. After a pause, they finally retracted. The woman in black straightened up and narrowed her eyes. Seeing the disciples of the sect in a mess at the foot of the mountain, she bent down to pick up Su Li and Wen Hun with both hands, and flew to their residence. 3 days later, Wen Hun woke up slowly. When he saw the ceiling of his room, the last scene before he fainted flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he couldn't lie down anymore. With a splitting headache, he got up from the bed and stumbled to the door. But he saw Su Li coming to him. Senior fellow apprentice. The girl was stunned. She stepped forward to support the tottering Wen Hun with surprise and joy, and dragged him to the room. Senior fellow apprentice, it's great that you wake up. Senior sister apprentice, you said that you can't get up yet. After you wake up, you have to lie down and recuperate. I'm not so fragile. Wen Hun smiled. Suddenly, he froze and said nervously, Did senior sister apprentice you speak? The girl shook her head, and pointed to the paper full of handwriting on the table. Senior sister apprentice, you went to guard the hall for you. Wen Hun breathed a sigh of relief. The master had secretly told him that if senior sister apprentice Yu spoke one day, he should immediately activate the tactical matrix of the sect and kill her. At that time, he was young and didn't understand it. Now, after experiencing all kinds of weird things, He understood that the master's instruction must have something to do with those ghosts. Since senior sister apprentice Yu guards the hall in person, she can definitely wait for the master's return with peace of mind. When Hun sat back on the bed and looked a little relaxed, his face was even a little ruddy that he couldn't see. He felt a little strange. He had been to the deep mountain and fought with those ghosts. Every time he overdrew that power, he would feel pain all over his body for a few days. His headache was much worse than now, which was worse than death. But this time, the overdrawing was obviously much more severe than the previous times, and the feeling of physical feedback was not so serious. Could it be that the master said, "The erosion period has already appeared"? When Hun's face was slightly pale, and his hands clenched subconsciously. He was only 98 years old. No, the master clearly said that the erosion period would only appear after 200 years old. Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong with you? You look so pale. Su Li said. She was also puzzled in her heart. She kindly treated this guy, but he looked solemn as if he was about to die. When Hun came to his sense, and waved his hands repeatedly, "Nothing. Maybe I'm too tired." Seeing that he didn't tell the truth, Su Li didn't insist, and let him have a good rest. Returning to the addendum in her house, Su Li took out bottles and jars from the universe ring, and frowned slightly. Is there something wrong with the medicine I refined? But the boy's body does recover well. Forget it. Let's continue first, and then adjust it. 3 days later, when Hun was completely healed, but his expression became more and more solemn. Every time he stayed with Su Li, he would be in a daze from time to time. No one knew what he was thinking. Although there were many cracks on some mountains of the sect because of the collision of Su Li and the evil ghost, fortunately, the big tactical matrix of the sect repaired itself, and the disturbance soon subsided. After when Hun was completely healed, he returned to the hall of the sect. Senior sister apprentice Yu returned to the deep mountain. Her expression when she left seemed to be very anxious. After her figure completely disappeared in the deep mountain, Su Li touched her neck. She didn't forget the situation that day. Her intuition wouldn't be wrong. Senior sister apprentice Yu really wanted to kill her at that moment, but she didn't know why she stopped. In the boring waiting, another few days passed. When Hun completed a certain transformation in these days, his expression changed from solemn and uneasy to calm. Junior sister apprentice. The setting sun was about to fall into the mountain, and the light was like blood. The cold wind blew, bringing a little snow. Su Li patted the snow on her shoulder, and turned her head with a puzzled look. Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong? When Hun showed a gentle smile, as when they met for the first time, you should keep what I said today in mind. Su Li frowned when she heard the words, which seemed to be a funeral. Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong with you? If you have anything to say, just say it. I will bear it with you. When Hun couldn't help laughing bitterly, listen, Master looks kind, but if it is really a critical moment, he can give up everything. You don't trust him too much. Su Li was stunned and blurted out, why? Master is obviously very. That's all an illusion. When Hun interrupted her and touched his cold chest, if I weren't a little special, he wouldn't teach me carefully. At this moment, when Hun suddenly transmitted the sound from speaking, the immortal cultivation sect, as its name suggests, raises a god. A ghost. Chapter 520. Although I haven't been in the sect for a long time, fortunately, the master always takes me with him. He doesn't tell me many things, but I can guess most of them under the influence of what I see and hear. After saying the word, immortal of ghost, when Hun seemed to open the shackles in his heart. While walking back to the mountain road with Su Li, he instilled all his speculations to Su Li. The immortal nourishing tactics of the sect is divided into 2 chapters. One is human chapter, and the other is ghost chapter. A long time ago, the immortal nourishing tactics should be divided into 2 factions, human chapter and ghost chapter. Master didn't lie half a month ago at the square. The inheritance of the nourishing spirit art is indeed incomplete, and only the first 3 stages are left. However, he left some leeway in his words. Only the human chapter is missing, while the ghost chapter is complete. Hearing that, Su Li stretched out her hand and pointed out a nimbus in the nothingness. Wen Hun felt a little uncomfortable when he sensed the nimbus, but he still nodded with appreciation. The second hurdle of human chapter has caught up with your cultivation. It seems that you haven't been lazy during this period. Senior fellow apprentice, since the practice method of human chapter is incomplete, why doesn't the master impart ghost chapter? Su Li heard a clue and followed Wen Hun's words. Wen Hun looked gloomy suddenly. After a moment of silence, he continued to transmit the sound in silence. His voice was slightly perturbed and heavy. Since it is ghost chapter, only the real ghost can practice it. If a living person practices it forcibly, he will only become a lunatic who is neither a human nor a ghost. Wen Hun paused, as if he was accumulating courage. Then he seemed to figure something out. He barely maintained a smile and said, "I practice ghost chapter." Wen Hun stopped, and the wind seemed to be stagnant at this moment. Su Li turned her eyes, and her face was full of curiosity. Her bright eyes were like the sunshine in a dark room. She was not afraid at all. "Senior fellow apprentice, are you a ghost?" Wen Hun was stunned and then nodded bitterly. Since ancient times, it is difficult for a malicious ghost to enter the reincarnation, but I am the reincarnation of a malicious ghost. I am born half human and half ghost, so the master accepts me. Su Li's eyes brightened and she exclaimed, "Senior fellow apprentice, you are so awesome. We can't practice the ghost chapter." Hearing this, Wen Hun's eyes widened slightly, and he fell into a sluggish state again. He was even at a loss. He had imagined the reaction of the little junior sister apprentice when she heard this, but he didn't expect that the little girl didn't play according to common sense. "Junior sister, I'm telling the truth." Wen Hun was impatient. His snow-white clothes suddenly turned light red from the corner of his clothes. A red-clothed evil ghost. This kid is really the reincarnation of an evil ghost. How rare! Black Lotus's exclamation came to her ears. Su Li turned her eyes and held Wen Hun's cheeks with her warm hands. Wen Hun's eyes widened, and he froze on the spot as if he was immobilized. The blood on the hem of his clothes faded away like a tide, and then gathered on his face. "Senior brother, your face is so red and hot. Are you still injured?" Su Li blinked her eyes, and showed a trace of worry just in time. Wen Hun came to his sense with a start, and hurriedly stepped aside. He who was in Yuaning realm was unsteady on his feet, and almost fell down. "Master, you are not a child anymore. When can you change your temper of teasing people?" Black Lotus looked at Wen Hun, whose face was as red as the bottom of a hot pot with pity. He sighed. "Another poor child. Junior sister apprentice, what I said is true. Don't take it as a joke. There are many ghosts in the Book Pavilion, the Isolation Tower and the Deep Mountain who are possessed by the devil after practicing the ghost chapter. When you see them, you must pretend not to see them and don't talk to them. Besides, if the master gives you the practice method of the ghost chapter, you must not practice it. You should pretend not to know it so that you can be safe. Junior sister apprentice, don't run away. Senior fellow apprentice, I remember what you said. It's getting dark and I have to cook." Seeing Su Li go away, Wen Hun sighed faintly. Forget it. Junior sister apprentice was still young. Even if he had entered the erosion period, it was not a problem to hold on for a few years. He still had time. After a sumptuous dinner, Wen Hun sensed that his physical body had fully recovered, and left with a heavy face. Su Li watched him go away, and closed the door of the courtyard. There was a hint of enlightenment in her eyes. Wen Hun is anxious to tell me these things, because he sensed that he was in danger. Since the ghost chapter can only be practiced by real ghosts, and this boy is just a half-ghost, there must be side effects. My medicine misled him to think that the side effects began. After figuring it out, Su Li smiled slightly, and returned to the addendum to absorb the power of the soul in the meat for dinner. In the middle of the night, the whole immortal cultivation sect fell into a dead silence. In the night of the immortal cultivation sect, no disciple was allowed to leave the residence. This had become a tradition in the immortal cultivation sect, which had never been changed for thousands of years. Those disciples who had once tried to test the method had all vanished from the face of the earth, and there was no exception. At this moment, the moon was in the middle of the sky. Su Li raised her head and glanced at the crescent moon hanging in the sky. She narrowed her eyes slightly and gently pushed open the door of the book pavilion. The two doors slid inward silently. At this moment, all the sounds disappeared. There was no light in the dark and empty door, like a huge mouth to devour people. Su Li's expression remained unchanged. As soon as she stepped into the book pavilion, the two doors suddenly closed fiercely, but strangely, there was no sound. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The candlelight on the wall suddenly lit up automatically, and the entire hall on the first floor was brightly lit. But Su Li felt that the lit flame revealed a cold atmosphere. It's so late, but someone still comes to the book pavilion. He is really hardworking. An old voice came. Su Li looked in the direction of the voice, and saw an old servant in gray sweeping the floor, holding an oil lamp, coming out from behind a bookshelf with a kind smile on his face. When Su Li saw him, she somehow thought of Hijio. This kind smile seemed to come from the same mold. Or maybe, the ghost in front of her deliberately imitated Hijio's smile. Su Li didn't speak and ignored the existence of the old servant. She walked to the bookshelf and walked to the place where the essays was placed according to her memory. Sure enough, she saw the familiar booklet. She reached out to pick it up and opened it casually. Suddenly, she saw the ending of the first story. It turns out that the woman in the mountain does not live alone in the deep mountain. There is an old woman and a half-grown girl in the house. Although the life in the mountain is hard, it is happy and quiet. The scholar lived peacefully with them for a night, and suddenly felt that he was not good at seeking fame. He decided to abandon secular distractions and stay in the deep mountain to practice hard forever. Seeing this, Su Li closed the booklet directly, and a trace of sarcasm flashed in her eyes. Every word in this book was distorted, revealing a strong sense of falsehood. Even if she didn't meet the ghost who pretended to be Wen Hun that day, she wouldn't believe this childish ending. You don't seem to be satisfied with the ending? The old servant who swept the floor came to Su Li at some time. He didn't look at the booklet, but at his toes. His voice changed slightly. Su Li suddenly turned around with her back to the old servant. But she just avoided the sharp claws of the old servant. She scanned the booklets on the bookshelf with her divine awareness. Suddenly, she came to the bookshelf and picked up a black booklet, Ghost Chapter. I remember that it is the human chapter that was put here during the day. Interesting. This thought flashed through Su Li's mind. She tried hard to open the black booklet, but she couldn't open it. It seemed that the inner pages of the booklet were all glued together and couldn't be opened at all. Junior sister apprentice. A figure flashed beside Su Li, and a woman in cyan with disheveled hair appeared. The woman in cyan had a pale face, but she was still delicate. Only a pair of dead fish eyes ruined the beauty. She stood on tiptoe and stared at Su Li's face. Her voice was as sharp as a night owl, almost piercing the eardrum. You don't have the divine token to practice this method. Put it back. Divine token? Su Li tilted her head and smiled. She put the black booklet in her arms, and her eyes fell on the woman in cyan. What is the divine token? Before her voice died away, the delicate face of the woman in cyan immediately became ferocious. Her clothes were stained like blood, and her hair grew wildly. After a few breaths, her hair became a huge black wave, and Su Li was submerged in it. Ignorant human, answer me. You are my sacrifice. The gray-clothed old servant turned into a wisp of smoke in awe and threw himself into the oil lamp on the bookshelf. Then his head popped out and licked his lips unwillingly. Poor human clan, they even attracted a ferocious ghost. No one came to the book pavilion to die for a long time at night. He wanted to have some fun, but boom! There was a sudden loud noise in the black hair, and countless broken hairs turned into black dust falling all over the sky. The oil lamp shook, and the frightened eyes of the gray-clothed old servant were illuminated. Su Li, who was integrated with the evil ghost, wiped the corners of her mouth. Her dark and deep eyes suddenly turned to look at the oil lamp, as if she was looking at an extremely delicious food. After awakening the fusion talent, it is the first time for me to use it. It turns out that the 5 senses of the evil ghost are very different from mine. If it is the original body, it will definitely not feel that the ferocious ghost is delicious. Thinking of this, Su Li picked up the shivering body of the gray-clothed old servant, the oil lamp. She chuckled, "Answer my question obediently or I will eat you." The gray-clothed old servant wanted to cry, but had no tears. His body trembled more violently. Who was the ghost? The book pavilion at night was cool. Frogs croaked outside the window from time to time. It was quiet and harmonious. In such harmony, Su Li held the oil lamp that was burning strongly in the wind and whispered, "I really only know so much. Don't look at me like this. In fact, I am just a little ghost with 300 years of cultivation. If you want to know the truth of this sect, ask those ferocious ghosts in red. They must know." The gray-clothed old servant was frightened and almost cried and pretended to be pitiful. "But you also saw that after I ate the kind senior sister apprentice, no one else came out. You see, even the book pavilion has returned to normal. Things are not easy to deal with." Su Li showed a trace of chagrin. It seemed that she was regretting that she ate too early, which made the gray-clothed old servant break into a cold sweat. "Grandpa, what should I do? I am going back to make breakfast for my senior fellow apprentice before dawn." Chapter 521. The oil lamp kept struggling, trying to escape from Su Li's control. But his efforts were not effective. Instead, he sensed that the 2 small hands grasping him gradually exerted force, and the old oil lamp suddenly made a sound of being overwhelmed. The gray-clothed old servant suddenly panicked. If the oil lamp was broken, he would also disappear. His life was hanging by a thread, and he immediately forgot the rules of the book pavilion. "Mercy! Mercy! This old servant remembers now. You go to the 2nd floor. The information on the 2nd floor is not connected with the 1st floor. There are many ghosts in red there, and they are all old ghosts who have lived for many years." As soon as the words came out, Su Li loosened her hands and threw the oil lamp into the Tsang Lei's cave. "If what you said is false, I will crush you and make medicine." The gray-clothed old servant looked at the cave and heard the words. How could he not know what kind of existence he had encountered? He could only sigh repeatedly and admit his bad luck. Fortunately, what he said just now was all true. Su Li did not hesitate and directly went up the stairs to the 2nd floor. When she stepped on the soft carpet on the 2nd floor, she felt a gust of chilly wind blowing on her face. All she could see was mist, and the chilly breath was several times stronger than the 1st floor. In such a dead space, as soon as the breath belonging to a living person appeared, it was like a lamp in the darkness, and immediately attracted the attention of all ghosts. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Pairs of blood-red eyes lit up, and their eyes were full of crazy appetite. How long had they not eaten meat? Su Li did not move, and slowly walked to the bookshelf, as if she did not see those malicious ghosts at all. The footsteps were extremely harsh in the dead space. Bush, bush, bush. Many malicious ghosts in red were killed. More than a dozen red lights lit up from the darkness. Su Li glanced at them roughly and found there were more than 20 bloody eyes. Every time she took a step, those bloody eyes would get closer, and some strange appearances were revealed from the darkness. Among them, there were humans, beasts, and odd monsters. Their faces were extremely distorted, and they all stared at every part of Su Li's body. If an ordinary practitioner came to this step, he would have been frozen to death by the chilly breath that escaped from the malicious ghosts. But suddenly, Su Li stopped. With a smile in her eyes, she looked around at the ferocious ghosts who were less than 3 meters away from her and said sweetly, 24. "Who is the oldest?" The atmosphere froze in that instant, and then all the evil spirits' blood-red bodies exploded. They opened their mouths full of fangs at lightning speed, ferociously and crazily biting the only living person on the scene. But this time, their food did not have the usual look of fear on its face. Instead, it had a strange smile on its face. Then, A bloody mouth that was larger than all 24 of them combined opened up from within the pitch-black shadow. All the malicious spirits stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Before they could even dodge, they were all swallowed by the bloody mouth. Whoosh! The second floor also returned to normal. When the gray-robed old servant in Song Lei's cave saw this scene, his body trembled even more violently, and there were even a few cracks on the lamp body. The 24 red specters on the second level are all lords who have cultivated for thousands of years, but they've all been eaten. In the moonlight, Su Li's shadow trembled for a while, and then calmed down. Su Li looked up at the third floor. She was a little unsatisfied, but finally went downstairs and left. The evil ghosts had eaten enough tonight, and they needed time to digest it. The next morning, when Hun woke up from meditation and came to Su Li's yard for breakfast as usual. "Senior fellow apprentice, I made a new lean meat porridge today. Come and have a taste." Seeing the familiar smile of his junior sister apprentice, when Hun felt a little relieved. He walked to the table and sat down. When he was about to pick up the spoon, he suddenly felt something and looked out of the room. He didn't know when senior sister apprentice Yu in black stood at the door, looking at him coldly. When Hun was slightly shocked. Why did senior sister apprentice Yu come out from the deep mountain at this time? Senior sister apprentice? When Hun stood up, the woman in black took a deep look at him and motioned him to keep up. Then she flew to the book pavilion. Did something happen in the book pavilion this time? When Hun's heart sank and he immediately put down his chopsticks to keep up. Sure enough, there is a connection between the book pavilion and the deep mountain. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she also flew to keep up. After a while, the three of them came to the book pavilion. Several disciples of the sect were waiting at the door. "Senior fellow apprentice Wen, you finally come." An ordinary-looking middle-aged man in Zhuji realm greeted them. He called Wen Hun, who looked like a teenager, senior fellow apprentice, which sounded very strange. Su Li glanced at him strangely. Wen Hun smiled embarrassedly. "Don't look at me like this. If other senior fellow apprentices and senior sister apprentices don't show up, I will be the chief disciple of the sect." "Senior fellow apprentice, you are so awesome." Su Li's eyes were bright, which made Wen Hun's face hot. Fortunately, the words of the middle-aged man came in time to save the situation. "Senior fellow apprentice, go in and have a look. The book pavilion is in a mess." Wen Hun nodded with a serious look and walked into the book pavilion. Suddenly he saw a ruin. The morning light shone down, and there was a faint smell of decay. "Senior fellow apprentice, when I and junior fellow apprentices came to light the incense in the morning, the first and second floors became like this. It seems that they have been abandoned for many years. It's very strange." When Hun walked to the ruins, and could vaguely see the traces of bookshelves in the ruins. He waved his hand, and a tattered miscellaneous book flew out automatically. But before it fell into his hand, it turned into flying ash and scattered. When the middle-aged disciple saw this scene, he immediately widened his eyes and said repeatedly, "That's it. All the books seem to be corroded by time and turn into ashes." When Hun frowned tightly, he, who knew some of the truth, certainly saw it more deeply than the middle-aged disciple. "Senior fellow apprentice, why does senior sister apprentice Yu disappear?" Su Li suddenly said. When Hun immediately woke up. He looked up and didn't see the figure of the woman in black. "Senior sister apprentice Yu?" The middle-aged disciple was slightly stunned, and immediately said, "I didn't see senior sister apprentice Yu. I was about to send someone to find you. Senior fellow apprentice, you happened to come here." When Hun frowned more tightly. Since the master left, the sect had many misunderstandings. All kinds of evil spirits came out to make trouble. Although he didn't know whether the senior sister apprentice Yu just now was true, he didn't bother to investigate it since she didn't act maliciously. Thinking of this, he waved to Su Li to let Su Li follow him to the second floor. When Hun originally thought that the strength of ghosts on the second floor would not destroy too many bookshelves. But when he saw the empty and bare space on the second floor, he couldn't help twitching his mouth. What on earth happened here last night? Why was it worse than the first floor? All the pneumas of ghosts disappeared completely. Master will come back half a month later. If he sees that the first and second floors of the book pavilion are destroyed, what will he think? Wen-hun sighed secretly and was about to go downstairs. "Senior fellow apprentice, don't we go up and have a look?" Su-li looked back at the second floor. A few evil ghosts hiding in the dark immediately hid in a darker place. "No, we can find more clues on the first floor. Come with me. I have something to tell you." "Okay, senior fellow apprentice." Wen-hun's voice came from downstairs. Su-li responded crisply and walked downstairs cheerfully. At the moment when she went downstairs, she could faintly hear a group of little ghosts breathing with relief. The book pavilion is the hiding place of many ghosts. The power of ghosts in these books is all extracted, so it becomes what it is now. Wen-hun spread out a book of essays and transmitted the sound to guide Su-li, and I can barely keep it from dispersing with the power of Ghost Chapter. Look through it and see if there is an ending to the story in it. Su-li opened it according to his words, and immediately saw the ending of the first story. She read it out. "Deep in the desolate and uninhabited mountains, there are countless wild spirits and monsters. How could weak women survive alone? They were just mortals who were killed while passing through this place. After they died, they were unwilling to become evil spirits, so they lured the living to become their food." The scholar didn't know that after being eaten by the 3 female ghosts, not even his soul was left behind. The ending of the story not only appeared, but also talked about the story of human and ghost without any taboo. Sure enough, the ghosts on the first and second floor of the book pavilion have all left. Wen-hun's face was a little gloomy. Those ghosts would not step out of the book pavilion for thousands of years, and they only moved at night. Why did they suddenly violate the agreement and leave? He didn't think those things would be destroyed. As far as he knew, no one could defeat those ghosts. Even the master would only compromise with them, make unfair deals one after another, and even let those things devour the disciples of the sect. The immortal cultivation sect was a fragile shell wrapped around the ghosts. It was okay for the ghosts to sleep. If they completely woke up one day, no one could survive. The human clan was too fragile. Wen-hun clenched his fists and looked up at the ignorant junior sister apprentice. He took a deep breath and dismissed the other disciples. Then he walked to the 2 stone lions in front of the gate of the book pavilion and stood still. "Come out. I'm Wen-hun. I have something to ask you." As soon as the words came out, the 2 stone lions suddenly shook. Su-li's eyes narrowed. The pneuma of these 2 ghosts was so weak that she could hardly perceive it. Last night, the pneuma of the malicious ghost in red was too strong, so she didn't perceive it. However, she just stood here. Su-li's eyes flickered, and there was a trace of playfulness in her eyes. The 2 stone lions suddenly shook more violently, but they didn't dare to pretend to be dead. They could only show 2 bitter faces. When one of the human-faced lions was about to speak, it heard Su-li's sound transmission. "If you dare to expose me, I will eat you." The stone lion stared at her and almost bit his tongue. He immediately swallowed the words in his mouth and changed his words. "Lord Wen-hun, what do you want to ask?" Wen-hun was stunned, and a strange expression appeared in his eyes. Although the 2 stone lions were extremely weak ghosts, every time they talked to him, they always raised their noses and wanted to step on his head. Why were they so humble this time? Did the master win back a little face for us this time? Wen-hun was puzzled, but he didn't care much about the matter of the book pavilion. He said in a low voice, "What happened in the book pavilion last night? Tell me everything you saw." The twisted face of the stone lion paused for a moment, and then seemed to be instructed by something. He immediately said, "Lord Wen-hun, the ghosts in red on the first and second floor were all dead last night." Chapter 522. Dead. Wen-hun's mature face was suddenly full of shock. He widened his eyes. Perhaps the respect of the stone lion gave him great courage. He finally asked the answer he had always wanted to know. "You ghosts will also die?" Ghosts don't belong to the 5 elements and don't enter reincarnation, but they will also die. Just like weak ghosts like us, if we don't have a powerful backer to protect us, We'll be devoured by even more powerful ghosts not long after we gain consciousness. When Hun was surprised and continued to ask, what kind of ghost can be regarded as a backer? Of course, it's the red-clothed senior. But you just said that the red-clothed senior are all dead. That is the ghost that is more powerful than the red-clothed senior. Even those lords can only be reduced to food. As he said, the stone lion secretly peeped at Su Li. Seeing that Su Li didn't respond, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. If it could sweat, its body would have been soaked with cold sweat at this moment. When Hun heard this, he suddenly felt a sense of horror. The ghost that was more powerful than the ferocious ghost in red. Did it refer to the immortal of ghost worshipped by the master? The master went for the immortal of ghost this time. Now the immortal of ghost wreaked havoc in the sect. What did it mean? Would the master come back after a month? When Hun was shocked and his face changed, Su Li was a little helpless. What was this silly boy imagining again? Well, I will keep the third floor of the book pavilion first. I will find out the relationship between the book pavilion and the deep mountain first, and then make a plan. It happens that there is one difficult to digest among the red-clothed senior. During the day, Su Li followed Wen Hun to guard the hall. She was warned by Wen Hun not to leave the yard at night. After dinner, Wen Hun left in the dusk. When it was completely dark, Su Li closed the door of the yard and returned to the adytum. The shadow shuddered and a drenched red-clothed girl was flung out. The red-clothed girl struggled on the ground for a moment before she managed to sit up. On her pale face, tears of blood flowed from her pitch-black, pupilless eyes, down her neck and body. Soon, a pool of blood was formed on the ground. Su Li faced her. Against the candlelight, the atmosphere gradually became gloomy and horrible. "Don't dirty my adytum," Su Li suddenly said softly and broke the silence. The red-clothed girl was stunned for a moment, and then her tears of blood flowed even faster. However, when they reached her feet, the girl sucked them back with great effort. The pool of blood on the ground also gradually shrank and disappeared. "Good girl." Su Li smiled gently and held the little face of the porcelain doll in her hands. The girl in red suddenly trembled more violently. "What's your name?" The red-clothed girl opened her blood-red mouth and spoke carefully. Her voice seemed to come from countless men and women, chaotic and sharp. This kind of eerie voice should have made people feel fear, but at this moment, the voice revealed a strong sense of begging for mercy. "Hong Baiju, don't eat me." Su Li smiled slightly and let go of her palm. She said in a casual tone, "It depends on whether you are obedient or not. Your companions are so ugly that I can't help but want to destroy them. But you are different. Although your eyes are not very good, your face is very beautiful." The red-dressed girl blushed and touched her face. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, she stammered, Is that so? Those are not my companions, and they always compete with me for food." Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly, and her tone was still gentle. "How many people have you eaten?" The dark eyes of the red-dressed girl were full of confusion. What are people?" Su Li chuckled and pointed outside. "Those living creatures outside who can move and go back to your place to read during the day." The red-dressed girl suddenly understood and immediately shook her head. She touched her dry belly, and a trace of curiosity appeared in her dark eyes. I haven't eaten them. Are they delicious?" "You haven't eaten them?" Su Li's first thought was that she was lying, and her eyes were slightly cold. The red-dressed girl suddenly panicked and hurriedly explained while stammering, "I really haven't eaten them. Just woke up. They always lie to me. I have been cheated several times." Su Li looked at the red-dressed girl thoughtfully, as if she was thinking about the authenticity of this sentence. The red-dressed girl was extremely scared and continued to stammer, "I am different from them. They all eat too much and become like me. I was born. I slept for a long time, and when I woke up, I couldn't defeat them." She seldom spoke and spoke intermittently, but Su Li still understood her. "Are you nobler than them?" Su Li slightly raised her lips and touched the soft black hair of the red-dressed girl. The girl was scared and wanted to cover her head, but she failed. "You slept for a long time, So it seems that you don't know the origin of the immortal cultivation sect. I didn't expect that the one who is the most difficult to digest is the most useless. As soon as the words came out, more bloody tears appeared in the eyes of the red-dressed girl. They almost overflowed her eyes and flowed down her cheeks. I'm so scared. I don't want to be eaten. I don't feel good sleeping. The strong sense of fear stimulated the black eyes of the red-dressed girl to burst out a little white light. Then it seemed that she was suddenly enlightened, and the memory before she fell asleep flashed back for a moment. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough for the red-dressed girl to remember a lot. The red-dressed girl froze for a moment and suddenly became happy. I know. She knew that she didn't need to sleep. The red-dressed girl's idea was too simple. Before Su Li continued to ask questions, she impatiently stretched out her fleshy and bloodless cold little hand and pointed at the center of Su Li's eyebrows. She shared her poor memory with Su Li. In an instant, a clear picture flashed through Su Li's awareness. See, under the dark sky, the familiar mountaintop of the immortal cultivation sect came into view. However, there were too many disciples of the immortal cultivation sect. There were tens of thousands of them. There were dense pavilions in the mountain range, and even the area in the deep mountain was included in it. How many years ago is this picture? Su Li's heart skipped a beat, and the picture in her mind accelerated. Soon, she saw a figure like Hong Baizhu standing in the air, and the human clan of the immortal cultivation sect were all shivering under her feet. The woman was slim and beautiful. 2 lines of symbolic bloody tears were dotted under her eyelids, like 2 rubies, which made her more enchanting. Is this the former Hong Baizhu? Su Li was surprised. The scene in front of Hong Baizhu in her memory was revealed. There were 2 ghosts like mountains of flesh. The pale flesh all over their body was like rocks, which were squeezed together in an extremely chaotic manner. The word ugly was not enough to describe the appearance of the 2 ghosts. Haha, Hong Baizhu, you are a ghost lord, but you can't even control your subordinates. Today, we will accept your gathering place. A hoarse, crazy, and childish voice came from the mountain of flesh on the left, which made Su Li couldn't help but pick her ears. Was the voice of the ghost cut into pieces by the natural law? It was very unpleasant to hear. In contrast, the voice of Hong Baizhu could be regarded as the sound of nature. In the picture, Hong Baizhu's pretty face was full of anger. She snorted softly, and the familiar voice without childishness sounded, "Even if I am alone, I will not be bullied by a group of trash like you. Get out of here." After saying that, she stretched out her hand and grasped with her 5 fingers. A blood-red umbrella appeared in her palm out of thin air. The top of the umbrella floated, and 2 huge red cold lights flew out. The 2 mountains of flesh laughed strangely at the same time, and raised a flesh shield that was constantly screaming. The 2 cold lights flew over and directly sank into the flesh shield. Then the flesh shield scream became louder. When Hong Baizhu saw this shield, her pupils suddenly shrank. The wall of evil ghosts is actually here. Aren't you afraid of the Ghost Emperor's blame? The Ghost Emperor? He can't even protect himself now. After eating you, I will be the master here. The 2 mountains of flesh laughed wildly. Suddenly, they wriggled and merged together. The huge shield instantly extended countless times, including the entire immortal cultivation sect. The body of the descendant of the Ghost Emperor, I really can't wait. Hong Baizhu looked cold and solemn. She was in a desperate situation, but she didn't panic. Instead, she showed a determined look. 2 blood tears fell down from her eyelids, and the blood tears that had stopped flowing immediately flowed down. Even if I fall into an endless sleep, I will never let you succeed. Then, the picture turned into a white light and then dimmed down. Hong Baizhu, who looked like a little girl, had her eyes shining. It turned out that she was so powerful before, but now she was going to be eaten. As she thought about it, more blood tears flowed down, and then she hurriedly sucked back all the blood on the ground. Although she was still Hong Baizhu, her consciousness was reborn. Although fragments of memory flashed back occasionally, they couldn't replace her current consciousness. Black Lotus, When are you able to see through this memory? Su Li transmitted her thoughts into Black Lotus Ring. Tut! In the era of ghosts, there was even the Ghost Emperor. In addition, it is not difficult to guess that it is the All Spirits era, which is even older than Kueyu Palace in terms of history. It seems that sometimes rumors can be believed. The immortal cultivation sect has existed for at least tens of thousands of years, or even longer. After all, the history of the All Spirits era is so long that no one knows how long that era lasted. Su Li looked at Hong Baizhu, who was still crying, and felt a little strange. In other words, she almost ate an old monster who lived in the All Spirits era? Fortunately, this Hong Baizhu seems to be the descendant of the Ghost Emperor, and it is difficult for me to digest her. Otherwise, it will be a big loss. Su Li thought, and suddenly pointed to the direction of the deep mountain outside the house. Sense it? How is the strongest existence inside compared to you in your heyday? Suddenly asked, Hong Baizhu forgot to cry, and began to sense the same kind instinctively in a daze. Her bloodline was unusual, and she soon got the result. It is very strange, very weak, and I don't know it. Now I am weaker than that thing. I can't defeat it. Su Li nodded gently. In this way, with the memory of Hong Baizhu, she finally got some ideas. After sleeping for so many years, you lost your memory, and your nest was occupied by some unknown little ghost? Su Li's eyes were shining, and she gently touched Hong Baizhu's smooth and soft hair. Inexplicably, I picked up a treasure. Is it because of my identity as the daughter of luck? Chapter 523. 34 Chinese Language Network, Wonderful Pop-Up Window Free Reading. Su Li's doubts. No one could tell her the answer. She didn't dwell on it and continued to ask, what is the gathering place used for? Hong Baizhu tilted her head and recalled for a while. She pointed to the door and said, I feed them and protect their energy. I eat enough. Su Li nodded and whispered, so, in your time, the human clan and you depended on each other and were food for each other? Hong Baizhu's eyes were full of confusion. She couldn't understand many words that Su Li said, but she could instinctively feel that the existence in front of her was very disgusted with eating people. So, she continued, those weak ones, as long as they are alive, have energy. You don't eat them. Su Li smiled slightly. The smile was so gentle that the little girl was a little dazzled. I don't dislike you eating people, as long as you don't eat innocent people. There are many cultivators in the cultivation world who seek death. I have yet to see a cultivator who doesn't deserve to die. Hong Baizhu was stunned. Then, Su Li squinted and said softly, I also deserve to die, but I am not reconciled, so I can't die. The little girl didn't understand. She sat aside and tried to keep the blood and tears from staining the ground. She was silent. Su Li took out a piece of palm-sized flesh. The little girl sniffed it and suddenly opened her eyes. She looked up at Su Li's palm. Her eyes seemed to be shining. She said instinctively, flesh and blood. What is Insi? The little girl was stunned again. Her little face wrinkled and she was distressed. Insi, what is Insi? She didn't remember. She only knew it was a good thing. Su Li no longer forced her. Song Lei's cave was a practitioner's cave. It couldn't trap her, so she put it into Black Lotus Ring and dealt with it later. It's better to see it with my own eyes. Su Li pushed the door open. The glimmer of the morning shone through the window with a rare warmth. But I can't destroy the seal outside the deep mountain rashly. Otherwise, the vibration alone will destroy the entire immortal cultivation sect. Su Li didn't think of a good way for a while. Junior sister apprentice? At this moment, when Hun's shout came from outside, Su Li immediately restrained the expression on her face and went out. As usual, Su Li and Wen Hun sat in front of the steps of the hall. Maybe it was because of swallowing too many ghosts, the perception of evil ghost was much clearer than before. If Su Li, who could not see anything before, transferred her consciousness to evil ghost, she could see the dark veins crisscrossing like blood vessels in the depths of the hall. All the veins were concentrated in a huge shadow directly below the hall. It looked like a heart, in which the pure black yin qi flowed slowly and beat very slowly. If you did not sense it carefully, you would think it was dead. A living heart. Is this what the immortal cultivation sect guards? She tilted her head and glanced at Wen-hun, who was in a trance. On that day, the bloody snake made trouble. The silly boy's first thought was to take me to the palace. That is to say, the thing under the ground is opposite to the thing in the deep mountain. But it seems that the silly boy is not willing to trigger the existence under the ground unless it is a last resort. Thinking of this, Su Li calmed down and continued to concentrate on memorizing the looming seal of the boundary between the deep mountain and the sect. After a few more days of observation, she could be familiar with the tactical matrix. Although she could not unlock it, she could go into the deep mountain without disturbing the seal. It happens that my soul power will be accumulated to the limit in a few days, and my realm will be on the verge of breaking through. If there is no accident, there will be thunder for punishment. I have to find a secluded place to release Su Bai and let him have a good meal. Su Li was quiet and no longer asked questions. Wen-hun only thought that she finally began to believe his words, so he did not disturb her and left enough time for her. In such a quiet and harmonious daily life, another 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. In a week's time, Master will be back. Wen-hun sat beside the steps with a gray spiritual saber beside him. In these days, some little ghosts came to harass him, but they were all beheaded by him neatly. However, in the eyes of the little junior sister apprentice, he was probably like a psychopath who slashed at the air. Wen-hun sighed secretly and turned to look at Su Li, who preferred to be in a daze rather than talking. He immediately felt that he had guessed the point. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly felt something and turned his head to look at the transparent seal wall deep in the mountain. He happened to see a familiar brown-robed old man flying over and landing in front of him with a kind smile on his face. "Master!" Wen-hun was overjoyed. He quickly stood up and said excitedly, "You finally come back." "Ho ho!" Hee-jio came close and patted Wen-hun's thin shoulder. "Well done. I know what happened in the sect these days. It's a natural disorder. It's not your fault." Wen-hun was relieved and nodded gently. Then he felt strange. Didn't the master never believe in heaven? He only believed in immortal of ghosts. However, he didn't think too much and asked with a smile, "Didn't you say it would take a month? Why in advance?" "I'll come back when I finish my business." Hee-jio interrupted Wen-hun and waved his hand. Then he seemed to feel something and shifted his sight to Su Li, who had been staring at him. At this moment, Hee-jio had an illusion that he was seen through. His face was distorted for a moment and then returned to normal. He said solemnly, "Wen-hun, why is this girl here?" Wen-hun remembered that the master asked him to guard the hall alone. At this moment he was caught red-handed by the master. He panicked and hurriedly stood in front of Su Li. "Master, it's my fault. I'm too lonely and bored, so I asked junior sister apprentice to accompany me. You can blame me if you want to blame someone." Hee-jio snorted with a cold face. "Forget it. You two, follow me into the hall." He turned around and stepped up the steps. Wen-hun smiled bitterly and was about to pull Su Li to follow him. But he pulled Su Li to an empty space. "Wait a minute." A clear voice came. Wen-hun looked up in amazement, but found that Su Li actually stood in front of Hee-jio. "When did the junior sister apprentice go there?" Hee-jio frowned and looked a little angry. "Su-yu, do you know what you are doing?" Wen-hun was a little confused and more uneasy. He stepped forward and pulled Su Li's arm. "Junior sister apprentice, what are you doing? Why do you block the master's way?" Su Li smiled and motioned Wen-hun not to panic. Then she looked back and smiled lightly. "If you are really the master as an apprentice, I can't block the way. But you are just a ghost. Do you deserve it?" Wen-hun suddenly trembled all over and stared at Hee-jio's angry face in surprise and doubt. But he was the master. If Su Li was a ghost, how could he not see it as a half-human and half-ghost? Besides, the junior sister apprentice didn't practice ghost chapter, so she couldn't see the ghost at all. "Why, ho-ho, I see." Hee-jio was silent for a moment, and suddenly sneered, "I was wondering why the sect became so chaotic after I left for only 1 month. It turns out that you, the insidious maid, are playing tricks in the dark. The means of the Ni sect are really powerful. They almost made the immortal cultivation sect fall apart." As he said, he looked at Wen-hun, whose face changed constantly. "Disciple, come here. What have I taught you? No matter what happens, don't panic. Is our relationship as master and disciple less than that of a maid?" Wen-hun looked at Su Li, who seemed to be a different person. His heart ached, but he still struggled and asked, "Junior sister apprentice, is what the master said true?" Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly, and her pupils turned into the pure black like that of the evil ghost. At that moment, He-jio was a mass of rotting flesh that kept howling. However, there was a layer of strange colorful light on the surface of the rotting flesh, which blinded Wen-hun's sight. "Senior fellow apprentice," she suddenly said and looked at Wen-hun seriously, "have I hurt you in the past half a month?" Wen-hun was stunned, and his heart began to waver again. Although he said that the master only took a fancy to his talent and cultivated him carefully, it was not easy to give up the kindness of raising him up. But the junior sister apprentice brought him indescribable warmth and happiness in the short period of less than 2 months. For the first time, he felt that he was still alive, and still like a living person. Wen-hun choked. He didn't want to give up anyone. Su Li didn't say anything more. At this moment, the black veins under her feet were constantly surging, sending her a hint of extreme danger. Although she didn't understand, if the mass of rotting flesh in front of her entered the palace, something that would make her unhappy would definitely happen. She still wanted to control the other 25 sects through the immortal cultivation sect. It couldn't be destroyed like this. The massive veins did not prompt her at the beginning, but flowed to Wen-hun. But Wen-hun's soul was shielded, so he couldn't perceive it. Those black veins stagnated for a moment, and then turned to her. That kind of sluggish movement gave her the feeling that he was anxious to find someone to try his luck in a desperate situation. It was like he was trying everything he could to make a desperate gamble. That mass of shadow has its own consciousness. Su Li was still thinking, but the mass of rotting flesh couldn't wait any longer. He said patiently, "Disciple, think about your duties. If you are so indecisive, how can you continue to be my personal disciple? How can you become the future lord of the immortal cultivation sect?" As soon as the words came out, Wen-hun stopped trembling. He raised his head. At this moment, his panicked heart seemed to be injected with a dose of cardiotonic. He-jio smiled. Then when he saw Wen-hun standing beside Su Li, he froze completely. Wen-hun showed a relieved smile on his bloodless face. "Damned ghost, how could a blockhead like you possibly understand the relationship between master and me?" On the first day when he became the personal disciple of He-jio, he was warned by the old man. "You only have 200 years. After 200 years, you will enter the deep mountain and continue to fight for our sect. So, if you are willing to be my personal disciple, you have no fate with the Lord. Are you willing?" "I am willing to fight for the sect." Chapter 524. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Wen-hun stood beside Su Li, and the gray saber appeared in his hand out of thin air. He stared at He-jio coldly. He-jio's face was rigid, like a robot that was suddenly stuck. Then, his eyeballs rolled crazily inside his eye sockets like marbles. His entire face began to shake, and pieces of human skin were shaken off like powder, revealing the layers of rotten flesh underneath. It was the first time for Wen-hun to see such a disgusting ghost. He couldn't help but retch and almost spit out the breakfast. But at this moment, he heard the clear voice of his junior sister apprentice. "Senior fellow apprentice, step back." He took a step back subconsciously, and immediately saw a barbed hook and sickle passing the tip of his nose. He was so scared that he broke into a cold sweat. If he didn't step back, half of his face would be cut off just now. But before he recovered from the shock, the rotten flesh suddenly swelled rapidly, burst his clothes, and turned into a mass of white flesh. In the middle of the flesh, there was a huge mouth full of sharp teeth, which was opening and closing constantly. Tut-tut-tut. You spoil my plan. I will swallow you. The flesh laughed wildly and crushed to Su Li and Wen-hun. Wen-hun's face changed dramatically, and he was about to step back. But a strong thought came from his feet and impacted his awareness. See. Wen-hun's pale face suddenly turned pale. The severe pain made him even unable to think, and instinctively covered his head. Drive it away. Don't let it in. Otherwise I will die and you will all. The roar stopped abruptly, and the pain receded like a tide. Wen-hun put down his hands, like a drowning person being lifted out of the water. He gasped violently, trying to relieve the tinnitus caused by the impact just now. He tried to open his eyes wide, and the blurred scene in front of him gradually became clear. He saw a pair of ink-black pupils, which were shedding bloody tears, occupied his whole sight. Wen-hun was so scared that his heart stopped suddenly. He swung the gray saber to chop, but was caught by a small hand. Well, don't scare him. He is more precious than you. Su Li's voice came. The small hand suddenly shrank, stepped back for 2 steps, and bowed to Wen-hun carefully. Wen-hun saw it clearly. It turned out to be a little girl who was younger than his junior sister apprentice. But the bloody tears in her eyes. Ghost? An obedient ghost? He was shocked, and everything that happened just now flashed in his mind quickly. Then, his sight couldn't help but pass Hong Baizhu and fall on Su Li. She still had that delicate and pretty face and that frail and delicate body. But now, the pitifully weak junior sister he knew had actually stepped on that huge mountain of flesh ghost and turned it into a thin sheet of paper. Was there really something wrong with the people from Ni sect? Wen-hun bit his lips tightly. He only felt bitterness in his mouth and resentment in his heart, but couldn't tell anyone. He trusted someone so unreservedly, but it was actually a lie? Senior brother, now is not the time to be distracted. Since there is something in the deep mountains pretending to be master, that means, Wen-hun was shocked. As expected, he had no time to think about Su Li's identity. He held his forehead and walked to Su Li and asked uncomfortably, Su Yu, what did you ask? Hearing the change of Wen-hun's address, Su Li raised her eyebrows and then chuckled. I haven't been in this sect for a long time. I don't understand what he said. Senior brother apprentice, you can interrogate. You don't call me senior brother. A trace of anger appeared on Wen-hun's pale face, and there was a childish grievance that couldn't be seen. Su Li couldn't help laughing. Although she couldn't empathize with Wen-hun's emotions with her state of mind, she still apologized with understanding. Sorry, I concealed my identity, but I only concealed a name. The name is fake, but my heart is real. Do you care about me or my name? Wen-hun couldn't find the words to refute for a while. He felt that Su Li's words were a little weird, but after thinking carefully, he found it reasonable. What did he care about? Was it just a name? As the little junior sister apprentice said, in the past more than a month, she had never been hypocritical to him. Even today, thanks to the help of the junior sister apprentice, he was saved from being killed by the ghost. Forget it. I'm in the erosion period, and I won't live long. Don't worry about it. Thinking of this, he felt unwilling. But in the face of business, he managed to put away his emotions, took out a red jade token from his arms, and put it on the rotten meat. With a bang, the red jade token burned spontaneously, and a small area of rotten meat was scorched. The meat immediately struggled violently. Wen-hun's heart sank, and he said, It's really a ghost in the deep mountain. If it's a ghost in the book pavilion, it won't ignite the yang token. So what should we do now? Su Li blinked and asked for Wen-hun's opinion. Wen-hun hesitated for a moment and said, I don't know what is in the deep mountain. If we can get the confession of this ghost, we may get something. It's easy. Su Li lifted her foot, reached out, and grabbed the rotten meat on the ground into a ball. Then she threw it to the little ghost, Hong Baizhu. The little girl caught it with some disgust. But in order to prove her value, she still tried to investigate the rotten meat. Then she said in a ghost's unique voice, 10 minutes, unlock the memory. Then you stay here. Su Li set a bounded domain of ghost for the little girl, and then walked into the hall with Wen Hun. Where are we going? Wen Hun looked back at the little girl with bloody tears who was concentrating on cracking the memory, and couldn't help asking. Su Li smiled sweetly. Senior fellow apprentice was bullied by a bad guy just now. How can I forget it? As she said, she stopped smiling, and stamped her feet gently. The ripples spread, and her soft voice instantly became cold. Come out. The shadow penetrated into the ground, and turned into a sharp sword to cut off dozens of black meridians in an instant. The pure black gas gushing out from the broken meridians was absorbed by the evil ghost. The shadow in the deepest part was angry at once, and controlled the nearby black meridians to entangle the evil ghost. The hall shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. Wen Hun was horrified. He wanted to take Su Li away, but found that he couldn't move Su Li at all, and the ground around Su Li didn't shake at all. This fluctuation. Is it possible that Junior Sister Apprentice and the immortal ghost underground fight? Wen Hun thought of what Su Li said just now, and was immediately stunned by his guess. At this moment, boom! Several holes were broken on the slate in the center of the hall, and dozens of black meridians shot out like tentacles. They paused in the air for a moment, and then turned into sharp swords uniformly, stabbing towards Su Li like lightning. Junior Sister Apprentice, be careful. The speed of the meridians was so fast that Wen Hun had no time to block them. At the moment when he spoke, those meridians had already arrived in front of Su Li. Do you think I am the weakness? Su Li narrowed her eyes, and stretched out her right hand calmly. The golden electric arc twined and flickered, and the power in her palm was released lightly. Suashing. A golden light as thick as a bucket burst out. Boom. Patter. Wen Hun's legs went soft and he fell to the ground. He stared at the hall without roof and walls in shock. There was no trace of those meridians in front of him. The ground of the hall seemed to be plowed by someone. Except for the rolled soil, there was nothing left. Junior Sister Apprentice? What was her cultivation? Senior fellow apprentice, I accidentally damaged the master's hall. Su Li brushed her hair behind her ears in embarrassment, and her face was slightly red. Wen Hun came to his sense. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say for a moment. I don't want either. Su Li shook her head and sighed. It's just that I have eaten too much recently. Even I don't know what realm my strength has reached, so I can't control it properly. Wen Hun was silent for a moment. When he was about to say something, he suddenly saw Su Li look slightly serious. She looked behind him and said calmly, Senior fellow apprentice, come to me. Wen Hun felt a chill in his heart. He rushed to Su Li without saying a word, and then he dared to look back. It was unknown when a black meridian as thick as a bucket sprang out of the broken ground, and turned into an indistinct twisted shadow. The shadow was colorful, almost containing all the colors in the world, but most of them were dirty gray at first glance. Your Excellency is the Emperor in the human world. The familiar ghost voice sounded, but there was a strong fear in it. You and I mind our own business. Why do you destroy my small temple? Oh. Su Li chuckled softly and said indifferently, Who are you? Tell me your name. Wen Hun was a little confused. The ghost called the junior sister apprentice Emperor. What did that mean? The master was just in Huashan realm. Above Huashan realm was nature's test, which had nothing to do with the word emperor. The twisted shadow didn't seem to hear the derogatory meaning in Su Li's words, and then responded, I am a remnant of an ancient ghost, and the ghost emperor gave me the name Hong. Emperor of human clan, you are a rare overmatch of human clan. Why do you offend the ghost emperor for a gathering place? Ghost emperor? Su Li tilted her head and smiled. So, you live in the all-spirits era? I heard that the ghost emperor only lives in the all-spirits era. When the twisted shadow heard this, a cold sweat came down instantly. Speaking of the ghost emperor, it's a coincidence. Su Li pointed outside the door. That little girl is called Hong Baizhu. Since you know the ghost emperor, do you know her? The twisted shadow trembled, and seemed to disperse. The atmosphere was stagnant at this moment. When Hun glanced at Su Li and then looked up at the immortal of Ghost, regarded as the master by the master, he couldn't help but scratch his head. What did the junior sister apprentice say to the immortal of Ghost? He didn't understand a word, but it seemed that the junior sister apprentice had the upper hand. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the hall. It was the little girl who pinched a bit of minced meat in her hand and said with joy in her chaotic voice, "It's out." When the twisted shadow saw the bloody tears in the little girl's eyes, it suddenly collapsed. It was really the legendary Hong Baizhu. The little girl held the minced meat and was a little confused. But she still walked to Su Li and reached out to point between Su Li's eyebrows. Puff! With a sudden sound in the hall, the collapsed shadow reappeared. Chapter 525. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. After the smoke dissipated, the distorted shadow was gone. Instead, it was replaced by a little black pig. It was just an ordinary little black pig, which was no different from the black pigs raised by farmers. When Hun saw the thing on the ground, he felt a surge of blood and dizziness. He felt that he had been humiliated after practicing for hundreds of years. This is the immortal of Ghost worshipped by the master? The little black pig on the ground stuck up its butt, walked slowly to Hong Baizhu, and knelt down like a human. "Your Highness, I..." Before it finished speaking, it saw the little girl hiding behind Su Li in fear. Although she was also afraid of Su Li, at least Su Li would not eat her for the time being. And this black pig was the same kind as her. Since they were the same kind, they would eat each other. "This little girl doesn't remember you." Su Li reached out and took the little girl in her arms. Her tone was smooth but indisputable. "You don't have to salute. Both the immortal cultivation sect and you seem to be in a bad situation. I have nothing to do, so I am willing to help you. Now I ask and you answer. Do you hear me?" The little black pig nodded hurriedly. It couldn't be better that the emperor of the human clan in front of it was willing to help. As for the consequences, it would not be worse than being swallowed by the thing in the Yin Mountain. "Very well. Now I ask you, what is hidden in the deep mountain? Where did He Jiu go?" Seeing Wen Hun beside Su Li, the little black pig didn't dare to lie. "Since the Lihan tablet was set up, Qingshui Circle has been changed. It is no longer suitable for us to live. I have consumed too much energy and am about to die." Fortunately, Yinsi of the Yin Mountain transmitted the sound and was willing to help me with flesh and blood. But Yinsi was sealed in the depths of the Yin Mountain, and there was a tactical matrix set by the human clan outside the Yin Mountain. I couldn't get in. In desperation, I could only make an agreement with the immortal cultivation sect. They entered the mountain to help me get flesh and blood, and I gave them a little flesh and blood. But He Jiu must keep the secret and not let others find out my existence. Otherwise, I would be attacked by the human clan, and this sect would also be destroyed. He Jiu promised me and kept his promise to keep a low profile. The immortal cultivation sect and I depended on each other. At first, we lived in harmony, but later, the little black pig's eyes darkened. It's true that humans eat the flesh and blood of Yinsi to improve their souls, but after all, humans and ghosts are different. After the excess of Yinsi's flesh and blood, many disciples of the immortal cultivation sect died suddenly, and new ghosts that can adapt to Qingshui Circle were born. Speaking of this, Su Li already had a guess in her heart, but she still didn't say anything and continued to listen to the little black pig. The newborn ghost was ferocious and forbearing. He possessed He Jiu's first disciple and sneaked into Yin Mountain, intending to devour Yinsi. However, Yinsi was not easy to deal with. Even in a weak state, he sealed him with one hand. Every 100 years, He Jiu would enter the mountain to perform a ritual to strengthen the seal. The new ghost hates me, Yinsi, and the sect. Every time the seal is consolidated, there will be some trouble in the sect, but it has never been more fierce than this time. I recognize the rotten flesh. It is the ability of the new ghost. If I am integrated with it, I will be delirious and do irreversible things. The little black pig trembled, and fear flashed in its eyes. If you didn't happen to come to this sect, I am afraid that not only the immortal cultivation sect but also the entire Jiuzhou region will suffer a catastrophe. Su Li waved her hand and looked indifferent. She said, "How did the ghost in the book pavilion appear? You said that you made an agreement with Hejiao. Hejiao is only more than 3,000 years old. There are even ghosts 4 or 5,000 years old in the book pavilion. Don't tell me that they are also born by the disciples of the immortal cultivation sect?" The little black pig originally wanted to deceive her, but it didn't expect that Su Li even knew the age of the ghosts in the book pavilion. It shook its head and told the truth. Of course not. The book pavilion is not a book pavilion, but built by imitating the Zhangyin Tower in ancient times. The ghosts hiding in it will not be affected by Qingshui Circle. There are also many precious scripts that only ghosts can practice in it. It was not open to the disciples of the immortal cultivation sect, but somehow it was opened later. Is that so? Su Li nodded gently, and light flashed in her eyes. Why don't you hide in it? Why do you have to suffer underground? The little black pig's eyes flashed, and it looked bitter. It's not that I don't want to, but that my body is too big, and the fake Zhangyin Tower can't accommodate me at all. Su Li nodded and accepted the answer. She was silent for a moment and asked aloud, "If I want to save the immortal cultivation sect, what should I do?" "Your Excellency, you are righteous." The little black pig was excited and bent its 2 forelegs as if it was kneeling. "If the ghosts in the Yin Mountain can be destroyed, everything can be solved. Your Excellency, please help the immortal cultivation sect through the difficulties." Phew! Wen Hun breathed a sigh of relief. Hearing this, he finally understood the essence of the immortal cultivation sect, and couldn't help but look at Su Li hopefully. Su Li looked back and smiled at him. Then she turned around, and her face became indifferent again. "Don't worry. I won't leave it alone even for the sake of my senior fellow apprentice. You go back and have a rest first. I will go to the Yin Mountain in a few days." "Thank you, Your Excellency." The little black pig achieved its goal, so it didn't stay any longer. In the blink of an eye, its figure disappeared and returned to the depths of the ground. "Senior fellow apprentice, the new ghost wants to invade again, and it won't be so fast. This hall doesn't need to be protected for the time being. Let's go back to rest first, and then go to the Yin Mountain tomorrow." When Hun nodded, looked around, and couldn't help sighing when he saw the Hall of the Lord was almost destroyed. Then he stepped away. After going down the main peak, Wen Hun went to appease the disciples of the sect. After all, the movement on the main peak was not small, which had attracted many people to stop and watch. Su Li returned to her residence, stood in front of her yard, and looked at the deep mountain from afar. "Little Su Li, are you really going to the Yin Mountain to kill the ghosts tomorrow?" Black Lotus couldn't help but rush out, and asked with a strange look. In his impression, Su Li was not a warm-hearted person. What? Protect the immortal cultivation sect for senior fellow apprentice? What a lie. No, that black and swarthy little piglet was a ghost, wasn't it? "I must go to the Yin Mountain." Su Li chuckled. As for whether to kill the new ghost or not, she didn't say anything. Black Lotus rolled his eyes, and knew that this girl was black-hearted. She probably didn't believe a word of the little pig's words. She just wanted a legitimate chance to enter the Yin Mountain. The next morning, at the foot of the Yin Mountain, many disciples of the immortal cultivation sect were ready for battle. They knew some inside information more or less. Although they were ordinary disciples on the surface, they were deeply trusted by the Lord. After a while, when Hun and Su Li came together, the leading middle-aged practitioner greeted them and said with worry, "First senior fellow apprentice, you must be careful this time. Even if you can't find the Lord, you must come back before dark." Everyone knew that after dark, there were all kinds of horrors in the Yin Mountain. Even if when Hun had a special physique, he might not be able to bear it unless he found Hejiao before dark. When Hun nodded. Seeing this, the middle-aged practitioner glanced at Su Li, who had just joined the sect for a short time. Although he felt strange, he didn't ask much. After all, with all kinds of horrors in the sect, curious people had died long ago. All the disciples took action. The tactical matrix of extreme yang did little harm to people, but it was not without harm. For the existence of half-human and half-ghost like Wen Hun, it must be opened before he could enter. Otherwise, he would be almost burned by the tactical matrix before he entered the Yin Mountain. 8 gates of extreme yang, open. The middle-aged cultivator shouted and waved his hands in an incantation gesture. A beam of white light shot into the spell formation, causing ripples to appear on the transparent barrier. Then the barrier opened up from the center and turned into a small door that could allow a person to enter. Wen Hun didn't hesitate to pull Su Li into it. Swish! The small door was closed again. The middle-aged practitioner was sweating profusely. He sat on the ground and gasped. A strange smile appeared on his face, but it disappeared in an instant. Others were busy resting, so they didn't see it. Puff! The gray blade instantly cut a wolf-like ghost into 2 parts, and it turned into black smoke and dissipated. It should be just a newly formed ghost. Wen Hun took back the blade and breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as he landed, he saw a sharp mouth full of fangs. Frightened, he pulled out the blade and cut it without saying a word. Unexpectedly, the little ghost was killed by 1 cut. He had never killed a ghost, which showed how weak this wolf was. However, Master once said that although there were many ghosts in the Yin Mountain, it was extremely difficult to meet them. Why did we meet them as soon as we came in? He frowned and looked at Su Li beside him. The shadow behind Su Li, who was eating, immediately disappeared. She smiled. If you want to know the answer, let's walk more. Okay. Wen Hun nodded. Suddenly, his face became entangled again. After following Su Li for a short distance, he finally couldn't help asking, "What should I call you?" Although he didn't know the true meaning of Emperor of the human race, he could guess that it was a realm that he would never be able to reach in his lifetime. Otherwise, how could a terrifying ghost that had lived for thousands or tens of thousands of years reveal its true form, speak nicely, and even have a hint of humility in it? Even if she didn't care about such a person, it was difficult for him to call her junior sister apprentice. Hearing this, Su Li smiled sweetly and said softly, "Since you feel uncomfortable, I won't force you. Call me sister apprentice or master." Wen Hun was shocked and blurted out, "Master? You are the grand elder of an I sect. But am I famous?" Su Li looked back and blinked. Wen Hun scratched his head. "I heard from Master that you are extremely mysterious and vicious. With you, NI sect is likely to be more difficult to deal with than the other 25 sections. If you meet them, you should be careful." Speaking of this, Wen Hun's face turned red. He scratched his head and said firmly, "Master must be wrong. Sister, you disregard your own safety and go into the mountain to kill ghosts. You are obviously extremely benevolent and righteous. How can you be vicious?" Hearing this, Black Lotus rolled his eyes. The silly boy was grateful for Su Li's kindness of going into the mountain to kill ghosts, but he ignored a big problem. The Grand Elder of a sect disguised her identity and sneaked into another sect. How could her motive be small? Su Li smiled happily and even said with a hint of relief, "It's great that you can think so." Chapter 526. 34 Chinese Net, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. The road in the Yin Mountain was not complicated. There was only a regular and spacious mountain road leading to the bottom, far into the black dense forest. It was dark and indistinct. Why is the terrain completely different from what is recorded on the map? Wen Hun put down the scroll in his hand and looked a little confused. Although the map was drawn hundreds of years ago, it was not impossible to find a trace of similarity, right? Did the junior fellow apprentices make a mistake when opening the tactical matrix? This is not the entrance of the Yin Mountain. Wen Hun said in shock, and immediately looked for the pattern similar to the road in front of him on the map. Su Li smiled indifferently and said, "The Yin Mountain is not big. Even if it is sent to the wrong place, we can find it." Wen Hun was stunned. Thinking of the horrible strength that Su Li broke out yesterday, he suddenly felt it was very reasonable. Even the immortal of ghosts was not her opponent, so the little ghosts and monsters in the Een Mountain were nothing. When he was about to speak, he suddenly saw Su Li turn her head and stare at his side. Wen Hun's scalp was numb. He moved a few steps away and looked over at the same time. He saw Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, who usually dressed in black, was wearing a dazzling white gauze dress at this moment. She was looking at him with a very strange look. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu. Wen Hun was in a cold sweat and patted his chest with a look of lingering fear. Can you make a sound when you come over? You really scared me. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, did not respond, but just looked at Wen Hun with watery eyes. After a long time, she opened her mouth and mouthed. Come. The gentle voice blew into Wen Hun's mind like a spring breeze, with an inexplicable breath, so warm. Wen Hun stared at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, blankly. He felt a pain in his heart without warning, and sadness surged. He touched his eyes, and saw drops of saltiness on his hands. What happened to me? He had never felt this strange feeling. Was it an attack? He soon became alert, and remembered the master's entrustment. He stared at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, and said, Sister, do you hear any sound? Su Li raised her eyebrows. Did you hear what she said? Wen Hun nodded solemnly, and slowly pulled out the gray knife from the scabbard. Master is right. Senior Sister Apprentice, you can affect my mood this month, but that's all. I will kill her now. Without hesitation, he leaped up and slashed down with his saber. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, disappeared in a panic. With a flash of white light, she appeared a little further away from Wen Hun. Looking at Wen Hun, her eyes were full of sadness. You're affecting me again. Wen Hun felt a sharp pain in his heart. He staggered a step and inserted the knife into the ground. He covered his chest with one hand and was about to pull out the knife again. Wait, let's see what she wants to do. Su Li stopped him and looked at the face of Senior Sister Apprentice Yu in white with great interest. She smelled a familiar breath and saw a clue. Wen Hun hesitated for a moment and clenched the blade in his hand, but Master said, Hee, Su Li chuckled. She pointed at the wrinkles between Wen Hun's eyebrows and smoothed them out. I'm here. What are you afraid of? If she really wants to hurt you, I will kill her with a punch. Su Li's words were calm, which calmed Wen Hun down. Then listen to you, sister. Wen Hun nodded his head hesitantly. Suddenly, he found that the pain in his heart was relieved a lot. He took a deep breath. She seems to want to take us to a place. Su Li's eyes flickered and she chuckled. Let's go and have a look. As Su Li said this, there was a momentary vibration at the end of the mountain road. Although the time was very short, it didn't escape her perception. It seems that the little pig is very bold. Black Lotus was speechless. He was old and shrewd, and had seen a lot of oddities. Su Li must have seen more than him. The white shadow appeared and disappeared from time to time. Every time it appeared, it moved a distance of several meters. Wen Hun had never seen this kind of movement in any ghost. He was full of vigilance, but his eyes couldn't help falling on the white shadow. Even he didn't know what attracted him. This feeling was too strange. Wen Hun touched his heart, full of confusion. The momentary pain almost killed him, but he didn't hate it or hate it at all. It's so strange. Su Li kept walking. No matter what strange terrain the white shadow walked on, or integrated into the mountain rocks, she could flatten it with one foot or punch through it with one punch. There was no obstacle. Wen Hun followed her in a trance, and turned a deaf ear to the sound around him. After advancing in this manner for 2 hours, a flat stone wall appeared before the two of them. The stone wall was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been deliberately polished. Su Li integrated the white shadow into it. When she was about to punch it, she suddenly raised her eyebrows and took back her fist. Then she walked to the stone wall and reached out to touch it gently. Buzz, the ripples spread, and the stone wall gradually became transparent. Then a stony mountain mansion came into Wen Hun's eyes through a transparent barrier, which was full of astonishment. You are... Wen Hun walked to the stone wall absent-mindedly, and looked at the tall young man sitting in the mountain mansion. The young man's face was exactly the same as his, and they were 80% similar. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, nestled beside the young man. Her lips squirmed as if she was saying something, but neither Su Li nor Wen Hun could hear it. It seemed that after hearing the words of Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, the young man raised his head and looked straight at the outside of the stone wall, but he didn't look at Wen Hun. He said calmly, and his voice came out of the stone wall. I heard from your mother that Insi didn't expect that we would meet. Hun, you have suffered these years. Wen Hun trembled all over, and looked at the young man in the stone wall incredulously. He fell down along the stone wall and muttered, Impossible, I am an orphan, I am, as he said, he suddenly trembled all over. His memory? How could he remember the memory when he was still in infancy? Those were all told by the master. This stone wall can only be seen from the outside. I heard from your mother that you look like me. She recognized you at the first sight. The young man smiled in a carefree manner, but his words were filled with a strong sense of guilt and helplessness. I never thought that you would still be alive. I'm sealed here and can't move an inch. I can't do anything, and I'm not qualified to be your father. However, since you're here, are you willing to talk to this incompetent father of yours? Wen Hun's lips trembled. The sudden truth made him unable to distinguish the truth from the falsehood. His mind went blank, and he couldn't say a word. Su Li wiped the stone wall beside Wen Hun, sat down against it, and chuckled. It seems that you are the new ghost that Hijio mentioned? Wen Hun trembled, and his nerves were a little numb because of the shock. His nerves were numb from the shock. He muttered, New ghosts? The young man stopped smiling and looked cold. But the words of Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white, eased his expression quickly. He said, New ghost? Is that what Insi said? I am Wen Hun's biological father, Wen Yuanqing. Insi? Su Li raised her eyebrows. It's what the ghost under the hall of the Lord said. According to what you said, that thing is Insi? It seems that you don't know anything. Wen Yuanqing shook his head. It seemed that he didn't want to talk about it. Since you can bring Hun here, you must have some skills. But if you get involved in this matter, you won't have a good end. Leave the immortal cultivation sect as soon as possible, and even don't stay in Jiuzhou region anymore. Su Li smiled very brightly, but Black Lotus couldn't help shivering. Someone was going to be unlucky. That little pig really lied to me. Su Li whispered to herself, and touched the cheek of Wen Hun, who was absent-minded. Although she was smiling, her tone was very cold. Wen Yuanqing, your son was raised by Hijio, and he also practiced ghost chapter. Now he has become neither a human nor a ghost, and he doesn't have much life left. In this case, do you think he can still leave the immortal cultivation sect? Hijio. When Wen Yuanqing heard this, his pupils suddenly shrank. He stood up and was about to step out of the stone wall. But Su Li only took one step, and then she heard countless sounds of chains in the mountain wall. Those invisible chains seemed to lock every bone of Wen Yuanqing. When he took a step out, he felt a sharp pain as if his bones were crushed. But Wen Yuanqing remained calm, and continued to pull the chains to walk out of the stone wall. Sniff, 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 sniff. The chains broke one after another as they couldn't bear the heavy load. But soon, many chains shot out from the stone wall and reconnected to the ports. What followed was an even more terrifying suction. When Yuanqing's body was stretched out, and his head extended far away. My son. When Yuanqing stretched his head out of the stone wall with difficulty. At a glance, he saw a pale and dispirited face leaning against the stone wall, and the hem of clothes faintly emitting red light. Insi, I will kill you. Blue veins stood out all over Wen Yuanqing's body, and he looked ferocious. His eyes shed tears of unwillingness, and the dense chains in the stone wall were tightened at the same time. Bang! When Yuanqing's body exploded into pieces of minced meat falling in the stone house, and then slowly condensed into shape. His face also became as pale as Wen Hun's. Is it worth it just to see your son? Su Li picked up a piece of flesh beside her, looked at it, and said with a hint of emotion, You were really a ghost clan when you were alive. It's interesting to become a ghost clan of ghosts. Wen Yuanqing gasped slightly, and his body suddenly stiffened when he heard this. You? At this moment, a hole suddenly exploded in the originally quiet nothingness, and a familiar face stepped out of the hole. My disciple, don't believe in nonsense. Seeing Wen Hun's distracted look, He Jiao looked a little angry. I told you that if you hear you talking, you should kill her. Idiot. You actually believe in the words of ghosts and fall into such a situation. Wen Hun raised his head blankly and looked at He Jiao's face. Somehow, he wanted to vomit. Then he looked back at the man who had just shattered his body for him. For a moment, he couldn't distinguish the truth from the lies, and could only look at Su Li imploringly. What should I do? Chapter 527. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Clatter. The chain was suddenly tightened, and Wen Yuanqing, with a pale face, stood up again. He couldn't see He Jiao through the stone wall, but he still looked at He Jiao coldly. If his eyes could kill, He Jiao would have died thousands of times. He Jiao was not affected at all. He walked to Wen Hun, and his face returned to its usual gentleness. He reached out and patted Wen Hun's thin shoulder. I believe you. The words of ghosts won't make you lose your way. As he said, he turned his eyes to Su Li. A dim light flashed in his eyes, but he cupped his hands and said respectfully, I have received the message from Lord Immortal of Ghost. There is such a strong practitioner like you in Ni sect. I wonder why you changed your appearance and came to our sect. For what? As soon as the words came out, Wen Hun's body suddenly shook, and his eyes on Su Li wavered. Yes, he was possessed. Perhaps all these were the inner demons brought by the new ghosts. As long as he didn't listen and see, everything could return to the original state. But Su Yu was the grand elder of Ni sect. She must have other purposes to come to the sect. He couldn't believe it. Was the only one he could believe the master? He tried to convince himself, but at this moment his heart wavered, and he could no longer believe anyone in the field. Su Li's perception was so keen that she saw the change in Wen Hun's eyes. This silly boy was still too young. As the thought flashed through her mind, her eyes became cold, but her lips were slightly raised. The smile was full of deep meaning. I don't deserve to be called as the senior. I heard that Lord he is so powerful that the disciples you sent have infiltrated the Wanli sect, the Liang sect and other 12 sections. Half of the Jiuzhou region is under your control. Is it true? Ha! He Jiao chuckled and shook his head. Senior, you think too highly of me. It's difficult for me to maintain the sect, and I don't hesitate to make a deal with ghosts. How can I extend my hand to other sects? Really? Then I misunderstood your sect. Su Li's words seemed to be an apology, but her tone was not apologetic at all. Instead, she said with strong interest, however, it's really an eye-opener for me this time. I heard that there is a Yinsi in the mountain who cut his own flesh and blood to feed a sect. I really admire him. Can Lord he introduce me to him? He Jiao's eyes brightened, and he nodded without hesitation. You are a strong man of the human clan. Lord Yinsi will be very happy to see you. Please come with me. As he said, he glanced at Wen Hun, who was still leaning against the mountain wall behind Su Li. When he was about to speak, he heard Su Li said with a smile, Your disciple Xinxing is simple. This experience is not a bad thing. I think he has understood something. Lord he doesn't have to punish him. A senior has misunderstood. He Jiao laughed, but his eyes darkened. Wen Hun was still useful. It was a waste to let him follow them. Moreover, with Wen Hun's low cultivation, it was difficult for him to survive, let alone break the stone wall. Everything was under his control. He changed his mind instantly and snorted, I'll give you another chance. Stay here and reflect on your mistakes. If you don't have a heart of stone, you can't cultivate. Then he smiled again and waved his hand, Senior, this way please. Su Li glanced at Wen Hun, who was leaning against the stone wall with his head down. She nodded with a smile and disappeared in the hole with He Jiao. Until the two disappeared, Wen Hun raised his head and his eyes were full of pain and self-mockery. His lips were bitten by him at some time, and the bloody smell spread in his mouth. "Master, sister is a liar. Your sister is indeed a liar." When Yuan Qing, who had been silent all the time, suddenly spoke and interrupted Wen Hun's self-pity, "However, she didn't cheat you, but he Jiao." Wen Hun looked back in amazement, and saw Wen Yuanqing's calm but unfocused eyes. He suddenly felt nervous. My son should be able to distinguish right from wrong. Wen Yuanqing seemed to have figured out Su Li's background. He said in a calm tone, "It has been hundreds of years since what happened in those days, but the hatred in my heart has not faded. Instead, it has become stronger. There are some things, whether you believe it or not, you are qualified to know." As he said, he looked at Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white beside him. Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white nodded, got up, and floated out of the stone wall. She looked at Wen Hun with a smile, and then stretched out her transparent fingertip, wanting to touch Wen Hun's glabella gently. Wen Hun resisted and tilted his head back. But when he saw the disappointment on Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, in white's face, he stopped and let the cold fingertip touch his glabella. Since he couldn't see anything clearly, he chose to follow his instinct this time. A trace of cold touch poured into the awareness see through the glabella, and quickly turned into pictures, which flashed back in front of him. He saw a young practitioner who looked very similar to him came to the foot of the mountain of the immortal cultivation sect with a woman who looked like Senior Sister Apprentice Yu. They talked and laughed all the way, and came to find his friend He Jiao. When he saw Senior Sister Apprentice Yu was pregnant, the young man was overjoyed. He believed He Jiao's words and went to the Yin Mountain to see Yinsi, so that the fetus in his wife's belly could have a higher starting point on the road of cultivation. Then, under the gloomy and bloody sky, a terrifying giant opened its bloody mouth, and countless masses of rotten flesh wriggled in its mouth, screaming. The young man was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He helplessly watched Senior Sister Apprentice Yu, who was about to give birth, was dismembered and thrown into the hell-like mouth. He angrily used the forbidden skill of Ghost Clan and sacrificed everything. Finally, he just cut off a mass of rotten flesh and died regretfully. Then, in the long darkness, the soul soaked with unwillingness and hatred seemed to have an incredible change in the Yin Mountain. He incarnated into a ghost, crazily devoured the ghosts in the Yin Mountain, and took revenge again. This time, Yinsi was caught off guard and was seriously injured. But Yinsi was Yinsi after all. Even if he became a different ghost, he was still defeated. Relying on the immortality of ghosts, Yinsi didn't waste his strength to kill him, and only sealed him in the mountain wall. In the long years, he broke free from his chains and committed suicide again and again. He tortured himself again and again. The obsession in his heart became stronger and stronger. In the end, he attracted the ghost floating in the Yin Mountain and turned it into his wife's appearance. At that moment, he was quiet. His wife was not a ghost, but an inexplicable special existence attached to him. She was very weak, could be seen, could penetrate any matter at will, couldn't be attacked by anyone, and couldn't speak. But he just understood what his wife was expressing. "Don't be sad. I will always be with you." The picture seemed to be long, but in fact, everything flashed in Wen Hun's mind in a moment. Suddenly opening his eyes, he leaned against the wall and gasped for breath like a drowning fish. His chest heaved up and down violently, and sweat seeped out of his forehead, causing his hair to stick together. He was in a sorry state. The impact of the truth was too great for him to bear. I thought you were eaten by Yinsi before you came to this world. After all, it took me a lot of time to become a ghost." There was a deeper meaning on Wen Yuanqing's face. There was a long-lost kindness on his face. The ghost's unique voice made this kindness with a strong sense of weirdness. "I don't know what method He Jiao used to keep you alive, but you can practice Ghost Chapter of the Immortal Cultivation Sect. Except for the Ghost Clan, you can practice Ghost Chapter without being affected. Your clothes are red, which is a sign of turning into a ghost. You can't continue to practice Ghost Chapter, otherwise the consequences will be unpredictable. Not all ghosts can keep their minds before death, and I am a special case. Who, when Hun took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and calmed down completely. When Yuan Qing closed his mouth and stopped disturbing him. No matter whether Wen Hun believed it or not, that memory could make Wen Hun's temperament to a higher level. After the transformation, no one could predict what Wen Hun would think. When Yuan Qing thought that it would take at least 2 hours for Wen Hun to digest all the information. In fact, he opened his eyes in just a few minutes, and his eyes were full of anxiety. Insi and He Jiao are on the same side. Isn't my sister in danger? When Yuan Qing was stunned, and his heart was inexplicably sour. Then he laughed. It seemed that he was not qualified to be jealous of the woman who led He Jiao away. Your sister is extremely smart. When Yuan Qing said with a self-deprecating expression, at least she is much smarter than me. She can see something wrong with He Jiao at a glance. She just saw He Jiao's arrogance just now, so that I can have time alone with you. She deliberately led him away. But Insi can't even beat you. My sister, when Hun gritted his teeth and said. From his memory, he could see that Insi's strength was extremely horrible, more horrible than any existence he had ever seen. Even if Su Li destroyed the Hall of the Lord of Sect with one punch as a lesson, he was still incomparable to the Colossus. Before he finished speaking, there was a burst of applause beside Wen Hun, and there was a chuckle in the applause. Silly boy, I didn't care about you in vain. Su Li's graceful figure appeared out of thin air, and she looked at Wen Hun with a smile. Wen Hun was instantly dumbfounded. He pointed at Su Li, and then turned his head to look at the place where Su Li and He Jiao disappeared. Sister, why didn't you mean that? Su Li stroked her hair behind her ears, and said with a smile, that is naturally me. He Jiao and Su Li talked and laughed all the way to an ancient and huge pavilion in the Yin Mountain. Senior, Lord Insi is waiting in the pavilion. I won't go in with you. He Jiao cupped his hands and stopped in place. Su Li looked up at the huge pavilion in the dark clouds unhurriedly. In her eyes, it was not a pavilion, but a huge ghost with its mouth wide open, waiting for food. Senior, what are you waiting for? Seeing Su Li didn't go in, He Jiao asked with a smile. There was no sense of urgency in his words. Su Li smiled sweetly. I'm just thinking about the meat in the room 2 days ago, which was given by Senior Insi. If I don't eat that piece of meat, it will go moldy. If Senior Insi gives me more, how can I keep it? It's really worrying. He Jiao's smile froze on his face. Chapter 528. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second, wonderful pop-up window free reading. It was obviously not appropriate to discuss the topic of Insi's flesh and blood in front of Insi. He Jiao laughed awkwardly and didn't know what to say to trick Su Li. At this time, he suddenly heard a strong thought from Insi. Extremely pure ghost energy. She is the best blood food like Wen Yuan Qing, even better than Wen Yuan Qing. After eating her, I can restore my peak strength and even go further. He Jiao's expression froze for a moment, and then his eyes immediately turned into surprise. An emperor of the human clan and ghosts were of different origins, so the benefits were limited. In addition, he was afraid of Su Li's unknown background. Originally, he only planned to let Insi control this woman, and then let her go and continue to be dormant. But after hearing Insi's words, he immediately forgot all the cautiousness. If Insi could recover, he didn't have to worry at all. He straightened his bowed back, and a weird smile spread rapidly on his face. Your Excellency, there is one thing I think you should understand. What? Su Li's attention was attracted, but she didn't see a purple-black arc suddenly burst out like thunder behind her. Puff! The ferocious scale armor pierced her chest from behind. Haha! He Jiao swung his ferocious purple tail and pulled it out from Su Li's chest. What, Emperor? I was expecting. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly noticed that there was no blood on the bloody hole in Su Li's chest. It's a trap. His expression changed slightly. Without saying a word, he stamped his feet, and a gust of wind rose. He retreated quickly with the box. But he only retreated a few feet, and his figure was forcibly stagnated in the air. He didn't know when his thick purple-black scale tail was firmly pinched by a slender hand. Su Li raised her head slightly, and her eyes under her hair were like a pitch-black deep pool, full of pity. It turns out to be a small lizard. It's old, and its meat is not very delicious. You are courting death. He Jiao had never been so humiliated, especially by his recognized food. He immediately became angry, and the purple-black muscles bulged from the loose skin. In the blink of an eye, he broke the disguise of the human clan, and turned into a ghost lizard with a height of 30 feet. His hands turned into claws, like sharp knives, and stabbed at Su Li's eyes. It's really barbaric food. Su Li licked her red lips, and the light in her eyes faded away. She no longer suppressed the nature of evil ghost. At the moment when He Jiao's claws pierced into Su Li's eyes, Su Li seemed to melt like ice and snow. She turned into a pool of black liquid and quickly climbed up along the claws. At the same time, a tingling pain came from her arms to her brain, as if there were thousands of mouths gnawing at her flesh and blood in the pool of liquid. What the hell? It can actually devour me. I'm a ghost. He Jiao was shocked, and an unprecedented fear rose in his heart. He screamed, "Insi, do it. Save me." Boom! The pavilion in the dark clouds collapsed in the blink of an eye. Lumps of rotten flesh quickly gathered together from the collapsed pavilion, turning into a mountain of flesh. The mountain of flesh squirmed for a while, and countless legs grew out from its bottom. It was surprisingly agile, and in the blink of an eye, it flashed behind He Jiao, opened its huge mouth, and swallowed He Jiao along with it. I'll eat it. A huge face appeared on the surface of Insi's flesh mountain. He burped and his whole body squirmed. White steam rose from his body as he tried his best to digest the food. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. He opened his trembling mouth and took a deep breath. An extremely strong suction appeared out of thin air. The wind and clouds changed, and the whole Yin mountain was raging. Countless ghosts screamed and were sucked into the mouth of the mountain of flesh. Even the dead trees around were pulled off the ground and flew to the mountain of flesh. Why is the wind suddenly blowing? When Hun stood up in surprise and looked at the source of the suction from a distance. Because of the seal on the mountain wall, the suction he felt was very small, but he still felt dizzy and his soul was unstable. The power of the seal is getting weaker. When Yuanqing's eyes flashed, and his unfocused sight fell on the Numa beside Wen Hun. Insi is stalled. Sister, this? Wen Hun was about to ask, and suddenly there was a loud noise in his ears. Boom! It seemed that something exploded. Blood dyed half of the sky, and then fell down. Wen Hun subconsciously caught a piece of debris flying over. He fixed his eyes on it, and found it was a wriggling rotten flesh. He was so scared that he immediately threw it away. At this moment, there was a harsh scream in his ears. He looked up and saw a stream of light zooming in his eyes like a meteor. Boom! The earth quaked and the mountain shook. The stream of light fell into the hard rocks of Yin Mountain, and the whole ground cracked like a spider web. The cracks extended along the ground to the stone wall, and a strong and cold pneuma escaped from the cracks. Clatter! The chain rattled. When Yuanqing stood up and saw the figure in the center of the crack at the same time as Wen Hun. That was the evil ghost, which had been digested with only half of its body. Its surface was stained with a lot of yellow water stains, and the remaining part was still corroding tirelessly. What is this? Wen Hun only felt that his scalp was numb, but he did not look away. Soon he found a trace of familiarity from the corroded half-face, and couldn't help but widen his eyes. At this time, half of the evil ghost's body suddenly stood up like a corpse. The ghost energy around it vibrated, and all the yellow water stains were shaken off. Then it returned to the shadow as Su Li waved her hand. My speed of devouring is not as fast as Insi. It seems that the means of Ghost Clan are not enough. Su Li's eyes flickered, and she saw the huge black shadow approaching slowly in the distance. She gently covered the stone wall with her palm and said, Wen Hun, retreat to the back of the mountain. Wen Hun trembled all over and immediately retreated to the back of the mountain. He had been shocked too many times tonight, and his heart had been numb. At this moment, even if the sky fell down, he could not be more shocked. Seeing this, Su Li turned her head, and her red lips curved slightly. The golden thunder in her palm instantly filled the gap. Boom! The stone wall was torn and collapsed directly like a piece of fragile white paper. Wen Yuanqing, who was still secretly accumulating power, was slightly stunned. He punched in the air, which made him a little uncomfortable. However, he quickly adapted to it. When he smelled the pneuma of divine thunder in the air, he couldn't help but shrink his pupils and was secretly horrified. Why is there the pneuma of divine thunder? Is it her means? At the same time, Su Li's voice came, and her tone was a little meaningful. Protect your son, and you'd better stay away. Wen Yuanqing's eyes flashed with fear, and he pulled Wen Hun to retreat. He just got out of trouble and was very weak, so he couldn't help. Besides, he was really afraid that he would be destroyed by the divine thunder. Insi didn't dare to lead to the test of thunder, but this woman was not a ghost. If she had the means of thunder, she might be able to kill Insi. Boom! Boom! Hills were flattened one after another, and Insi's huge figure slowly appeared in everyone's sight through the mist. His pale and pitted skin looked very gloomy and horrible under the moonlight. In the center of the mountain of flesh, there was a basin-sized bloody hole. The rotten flesh squirmed, and the bloody hole was constantly shrinking. He Jiao, who turned into his original body, stood on the top of the mountain of flesh. At this moment, his arms that were devoured by Su Li had grown out again. He looked at Su Li with bloodshot eyes. You are the first one who dares to destroy my original body in thousands of years. Is that the true face of He Jiao? In the distance, Wen Hun's eyes were blank. At this moment he finally recognized the truth. Everything he saw in that memory was true. Su Li smiled sweetly. Her petite figure standing under the mountain of flesh looked very small. The taste of ghosts is very good. At least my shadow likes you very much. As soon as these words came out, even the ghost, who represented horror, couldn't help but feel a chill. He was furious and stopped talking nonsense. Let's eat her. The mountain of flesh squirmed for a while, and the chilly wind blew. The fierce suction force acted on Su Li's whole body again. But the state of evil ghost in Su Li's original body couldn't be compared with a single evil ghost. She raised her eyebrows, stepped on a crack under her feet, and disappeared instantly. So fast! What a strong physical body! When Yuanqing marveled in his heart. He had never seen a human clan that could refine their physical body to such a degree. Could it be that the weakness of the human clan's physical body had been eliminated in Qingshui Circle after the rule changed? Bang! Su Li punched the mountain of flesh, and the shock wave rippled. The surrounding flesh and blood instantly exploded into holes, and countless rotten flesh fell down. But in the blink of an eye, the holes were filled by rotten flesh again. Su Li didn't intend to stop at all. Relying on the absolute speed, she turned into a sky full of residual shadows, and the mountain of flesh bloomed everywhere. When Yuanqing frowned and couldn't help but remind her, Insi's body is very small. What you hit is the rotten flesh on the surface of his body. It can't cause any damage at all. Boom! Su Li punched another bloody hole with a width of 30 meters again, as if she didn't hear it. It was rare for a human target to stand her full strength. How could she be willing to kill it at once? He Jiao, who blended into the protection of the rotten flesh, looked at Su Li, who was beating crazily outside, and he was shocked and angry. But my means don't have any effect. How could he let Su Li beat Insi violently? At this moment, he almost used all the means of ghosts such as poison, illusion, erosion, infiltration, and so on, but Su Li didn't respond at all. Was she still a fragile human clan? What are you waiting for? No matter how many layers of flesh I have, I shouldn't waste them like this. Insi's angry thought came. He had never been humiliated by a little bug since he had consciousness. Now he just wanted to end it quickly and eat this little bug to restore his strength. He Jiao was aggrieved. Seeing that Insi's thought became colder and colder, he finally told the truth. Do you think I don't want to? All my means are useless to her. What? Insi's body trembled. He was much older than Hijio, so he immediately thought of the natural enemy of ghosts that had been extinct for a long time. He was extremely timid, so he didn't say a word. Hundreds of feet grew out from the bottom of his feet, and he retreated quickly. Want to escape? Su Li narrowed her eyes and sighed softly, "It's really boring." Before she finished speaking, her figure had disappeared like a phantom, and then appeared on the head of Insi, who was moving quickly. This time, even when Yuan Qing didn't see it clearly. She became faster. She has never shown her real strength. When Yuan Qing's pupils shrank suddenly, and he pulled Wen Hun to hide further subconsciously. The next moment, a golden line between heaven and earth dispersed the dark clouds. Chapter 529. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second. Wonderful pop-up window free reading. Cloud-piercing golden line. Even if it was far away, when Yuan Qing could smell the strong smell of sharp divine thunder drifting from a distance. It's really divine thunder of gold. Is this person a disciple of the holy sect of Wind Thunder? But the stubborn people of the holy sect of Wind Thunder are always hotheads. When they see something contaminated with ghost energy, they will boast of being righteous and kill it. After she killed the evil ghost, the next one. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "Let's go and have a look." Wen Hun had long wanted to know the situation of the battle, so he immediately followed Wen Yuan Qing. Sizzle, under the action of divine thunder, the rotten flesh was irreversibly consumed. Finally, Insi revealed his real body, a black pig as tall as 2 people. It turns out that you are really a little pig. It seems that the one under the Hall of the Lord is your clone. Su Li stopped the bombardment of divine thunder and summoned Song Lei's cave to hover over Insi's head. Another more powerful breath of divine thunder instantly shrouded them, making Insi and Hijio completely desperate. "Sister Li, what is this? It disgusts me so much." In Song Lei's cave, Su Bai stretched out a thunder branch and then took it back. He pointed to Hong Baizhu, who lived at the other end of Song Lei's cave, but it's not as annoying as her. Hong Baizhu's little face became serious, and she transmitted the sound in disgust, "I hate you too. In a sense, you are each other's natural enemies. But now you are all mine, so you are not allowed to fight." Su Li transmitted the sound, and Su Bai nodded obediently. The little girl Hong Baizhu immediately put away her fierce expression and shrank back to the depth of Song Lei's cave. Su Li laughed in her heart. Divine thunder and ghosts were supposed to kill each other as soon as they met. It was also a wonder that such a harmonious side appeared under her control. Insi and Hijio saw that Su Li was distracted, but the breath of divine thunder above their heads was more magnificent than that of Jinwu. They could not find a chance to escape at all. "Now I ask, and you answer. Do you hear me clearly?" Su Li looked back at them, and her tone was as leisurely as 2 days ago. But Insi could no longer act as calmly as before. He trembled and panicked. "Emperor, please spare my life. Everything is planned by Thousand-Faced Ghost. It has nothing to do with me." "Who is the Thousand-Faced Ghost?" Before Insi answered, Su Li heard a voice behind her. "The Thousand-Faced Ghost is Hijio. Hijio is my bosom friend. After being eaten by the Thousand-Faced Ghost, the Thousand-Faced Ghost changed into Hijio's appearance and tricked me into a dead end." When Yuan Qing stood not far from Su Li, he originally wanted to sound out her background, but when he thought of her overbearing character just now, he finally swallowed his words of testing. Su Li nodded gently, and her gentle eyes fell on Hijio. "So, tell me, how is the plan to control the 12 sects going? The longer one lived, the more one cherished his life." Hijio, no, the Thousand-Faced Ghost, couldn't jump out of this rule either. He scolded Insi in his heart for betraying him even when he was about to die. After a moment of silence, he braced himself and asked, "If I tell you, can you spare my life?" Su Li raised her eyebrows and said in a gentle tone, "Give me a reason to let you go." "We can't let him go. Wen Yuanqing was full of hatred, but he couldn't calm down after all. He couldn't help but say, "The thousand-faced ghost is cunning and vicious. He is definitely a scourge. We can't let him live." Su Li glanced at Wen Yuanqing. Although she didn't show any intention, Wen Yuanqing was stiff all over, and the alarm in his heart rang loudly. This was a warning. She was warning me not to meddle in other people's business. To this end, this woman is definitely not as gentle and kind as she looks on the surface. She is not a member of the Holy Fenglei sect. She may also be an alien of the Holy Fenglei sect. Several thoughts flashed through Wen Yuanqing's mind, and he was more afraid of Su Li. When Han was young, but he couldn't see things as deeply as his father. He just thought secretly that Sister Su controlled the life and death of ghosts. How awesome! Did you hear that? You are a scourge. Why should I let you live? Su Li said slowly, and the golden thunder arc lingered on her fingertips. Wen Yuanqing immediately retreated a few steps without a trace. Your Excellency, I'm useful. I'm absolutely useful. He Jiao seemed to have grabbed onto a straw before drowning, and he desperately said, "The key figures of the 12 sects are all under my control. So long as Your Excellency Emperor gives the order, the 12 sects will be at your disposal." Ho ho, when Yuanqing sneered and undermined him, "I taught you the secret method of controlling people, which is a method of our ghost clan. Since you are loyal to this senior, why don't you hand over the control jade token? That will show your sincerity, isn't it?" He Jiao's face turned blue, and he stared at Wen Yuanqing. He transmitted the sound gloomily, "Don't forget that you are also a ghost. She controls the divine thunder, and it's easy for her to kill us. If you help her now, you will die in the end." When Yuanqing scratched his ears and said lightly, "Transmitting the sound in front of me, it seems that you are not going to be loyal to this Her Excellency Emperor." He Jiao's face was completely gloomy, and he pinched an emerald jade token in his hand. The awe for Su Li in his eyes faded away, and he was full of desperate madness. "Let me go. Otherwise, I will crush the jade token." No one can get the right to control the 12 sects. When Yuanqing sneered, "Thousand-faced ghost, it seems that you are old, and your memory is not very good. Let me help you recall. The means of our ghost clan usually have a back door, and only our ghost clan can control it. If I haven't got out of trouble, you can do whatever you want. But in front of me, do you want to die together with me? No way." He Jiao's pupils shrank suddenly, and he was shocked. At the moment when he was distracted, the thunder in Tsang Lei's cave poured down, and burned He Jiao into ashes in the blink of an eye. Jingle, the emerald jade token fell to the ground, and automatically flew into Su Li's hand. When Yuanqing calmed down and said calmly, "There is no back door in the means of our ghost clan. What we did just now was to deceive the thousand-faced ghost, so you can use this jade token at ease." Su Li glanced up at Wen Yuanqing's tense face and said with a chuckle, "Of course, I know the means of the ghost clan. You don't have to explain." Seeing this, when Han suddenly realized, it turns out that it was all a trap set by my sister and my father. Thinking of the word father, when Han suddenly became more like a thief and shrank back without a trace. Although he hadn't accepted the sudden appearance of father, he thought in his heart that no one would find it. Insi was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He Jiao was still alive and kicking a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, he was the only one left? "I heard that your flesh and blood can enhance the soul?" Su Li put away the jade token and then asked. Insi was stunned and immediately nodded wildly. "My flesh and blood can enhance the soul. As long as I don't die, I can be reborn." As soon as he finished speaking, when Yuanqing said faintly, "He is lying. Insi's flesh and blood are useless. What they provide to the disciples of the immortal cultivation sect is the flesh and blood of another mysterious ghost. If you eat too much of that flesh and blood, you will become a ghost and become their food. Those of the human clan that they let go have been brainwashed long ago in order to go down the mountain for him. They bring new potential food." Insi was suddenly frightened. "How do you know?" "The ghost clan has a talent called Virtual Eye, which can see all the scenes within 100 miles. This is the most useless talent in the ghost clan. When Yuanqing grinned when he said this, you never set up the isolation matrix when you talk with the thousand-faced ghost. After hundreds of years, it is enough for me to know all your secrets. After that, when Yuanqing turned his eyes and said to Su Li, this time, what I said is true. Su Li raised her eyebrows, and the thunder and lightning poured down from the cave. Even for the revenge of Wenhun, I never intend to let them live. Su Li curled her lips, what I said is also true. When Yuanqing. In the belly of Yin Mountain, when Yuanqing took Su Li and Wenhun to a bloody mountain of flesh. This is the place where Yinsi and others collect flesh. I heard that the owner of the immortal cultivation sect here. Before when Yuanqing finished his words, he suddenly felt a very cold pneuma coming to his face. Then a red and white dress flashed by. The little girl stood in front of the mountain of flesh with a red face and cried, "Don't look at it." When Yuanqing stared at her slightly, "This little girl, no." The pneuma of the little ghost was exactly the same as that of the mountain of flesh. Su Li laughed out, "It turns out that this is your original body. You are actually turned into meat." The little girl was immediately anxious, and tears of blood flowed down from her eyes. "Don't laugh." The mountain of flesh was taken away by the little girl as expected. Although she didn't know where Hong Baizhu put it, it didn't prevent her from knocking it into Tsang Lei's cave, so Su Li didn't bother to investigate it. Su Li didn't want to stay here any longer, and directly left the mess of the immortal cultivation sect to Wen Yuanqing. Within 8 years, I want to see a ghost sect that I can use. Wen Yuanqing was shocked, and his eyes brightened. I will live up to your expectations. At the gate of the soul cultivation sect. When Hun watched Su Li go away, and his expression was still a little blank. In just 2 days, his life had undergone earth-shaking changes. It was like a dream. When Yuanqing smiled and said slowly, "People's fate is changeable, like the clouds in the sky and the dogs in the sky. Don't feel confused. We can have a promising future if we follow her. But I have entered the erosion period, and I will degenerate into a ghost in a year at most. How can I talk about the future?" When Hun was very frustrated. When Yuanqing was suddenly stunned. He sniffed and couldn't help frowning. "My senses can't be wrong. Although you have a trace of the smell of the red dress, it is still far from becoming a ghost. Even if you keep practicing Ghost Chapter, it will take at least 200 years. How can there be the erosion period? Did I make a mistake?" When Hun was relieved when he heard the words, and then said strangely, "But my body has become inexplicably relaxed recently, and I don't feel tired." When Yuanqing smiled slightly. Obviously, he was a gloomy ghost, but his smile was gentle. "Someone has helped you to recuperate secretly. Think about what you have refined or eaten recently." When Hun was still not used to communicating with his father, who suddenly appeared. He scratched his head subconsciously, and then the time when he ate in Su Li's courtyard for 3 meals a day suddenly flashed in his mind. "I see." He was suddenly enlightened, and then he felt warm and bitter in his heart. Those days will never come again. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.